Welcome to the King's Report. Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for the second King of Cheongguk, Hyung. In the United States, today is Veterans Day. It's the anniversary of the end of World War I, and we'll be talking about that later. Let's see. In terms of our weather this morning, it's Cheongguk area right now is 21 degrees, but its temperature is falling. It's going to get down to about 16 or 15 degrees before the sun rises, and it even feels colder than that. It feels like it's 15 degrees right now already, and the real field temperature is going to be 9 degrees at its lowest point before the sun rises. But the wind has died down, and so it's maybe a little bit easier to bear. Today we expect a high of 37 degrees with partly cloudy skies, and then tonight temperature will be going back down, this time to the single digits, to 9 degrees. But don't worry, it'll only feel like it's 15. But then tomorrow things are going to warm up a bit, and we'll be getting up into the mid-40s for a high temperature tomorrow, and then back down to about 26 degrees on Monday morning. Monday morning, there's a forecast for what the weather report is calling a snow event, but little or no accumulation is expected. Perhaps 0.2 inches or something like that, they say, is the most likely amount of accumulation in the Cheongguk area. Perhaps more in higher elevations. It's going to be a combination of wind and rain and snow, so the higher elevations will have more snow than rain, I expect. All right, let's go to our rimas for this morning. First of all, in the Bible, I'm in 2 Kings chapter 16. This is a chapter about the rule of a bad king. King's name is Ramaliah Ahaz, and he became king when he was 20 years old, and he reigned for 16 years, so he died when he was 36. And his a number of things that he did, but he defiled the temple, and he was on a trip to Damascus. He went to Damascus and saw that he saw the altar in the pagan temple in Damascus, and he thought, wow, that's great. I want one just like this. But the problem is that the altar in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem had been built according to a specification given by divine instruction. But Ahaz felt that, no, I know better. This is a better one. I like this one more than the one that we have in Jerusalem. And so he had someone sort of make the drawings and everything, and then sent those drawings back to Jerusalem, and ordered his chief priest to build one just like it. And he even went back to when he got back to Jerusalem. He had God's temple, the original God's altar, the original altar, put away someplace where it could not be seen. And so his new altar became the main altar in the temple. And in my Rima this morning, I'm directed to verse 15. So Ahaz is the king, and Urijah is the chief priest, who's basically doing anything that he's told. So the chief priest is not fulfilling his role as God's servant. He's just going along with anything that the king tells him to do. I guess because of he wants the position and he wants the money that he's getting from the king. And King Ahaz commanded Urijah the priest, saying, "Upon the great altar burn the great altar." Here would be the altar that has been built to replace God's altar, the one that was modeled after the pagan altar in Damascus. Upon the great altar, and this is his instructions to the chief priest, upon the great altar burn the morning burnt offering and the evening meat offering, and the king's burnt sacrifice and his meat offering, with the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their meat offering and their drink offerings, and sprinkle upon it all the blood of the burnt offering and all the blood of the sacrifice and the brazen altar shall be for me to inquire by. So he's going to use his altar to make all the offerings, all the offerings. And I noticed that in the first, towards the beginning of this chapter, in verse 3, says that he made his son to pass through the fire. Was it yesterday or the day before? The king noted that when this expression is used in the Bible, it refers to child sacrifice. In other words, he made his son to pass through the fire. Means that one of his children was, or a son, or somebody's son, was sacrificed through the fire. And the Bible says, according to the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel. So it was the heathen practice, it was the pagan practice to offer children as burnt offerings. And I believe it was yesterday the king noted that Judaism was the first religion to deny this kind of a thing, to deny child sacrifice. And here we see this bad king Ahaz, who is a king of Judah. He is doing something that is an abomination to God. So, but my rima this morning, though, has to do with 15, where he has verse 15, where this king has declared that he's going to use his own altar to the exclusion of the one that was made by God's divine instruction. Kind of reminds you of the what has happened to the Cheonsonggyung, don't you think, where the Han mother has, and her chief priests, as it were, have created a book which they say is, this is superior, it's more organized, and even the English edition is said to be, it's better translated. But it's not God's Cheonsonggyung. One small detail, it has nothing to do with God. Just like King Ahaz's altar may have been more beautiful to the human eye, may have been more grandeur and everything like that, but just one small problem, it had nothing to do with God. And I think we need to think carefully of, the altar is not just I don't know if it was made of wood or rock or whatever, but it's not just it's not an external piece of construction. This is a place where God and human beings communicate. And today, this is our altar. This is our altar. This is our altar. This is the place where we are able to come and communicate with God, the Cheonsonggyung, and the 8 textbooks and teaching materials. And if someone makes something that has a nicer cover, is more organized, has less repetition, etc., better translated, it doesn't matter. Because this is the altar that God has created. This is the altar that True Father has given us, and this is the place where we are able to communicate with God. And we need to remember that. So, speaking of that Cheonsonggyung, let's go to our Rima in the Cheonsonggyung, and I'm in the book on Our Life in the Spiritual Realm. This is book 6, chapter 3, and in fact I'm in the very final selection in that book, the final selection before it goes on to the next one on etiquette and ceremonies. These words were spoken in 1999. A path leading to the valley of hell was created due to the failure in Adam's responsibility. No one knows how miserable the restoration course was. turning this situation around and reestablishing a path of life while digesting humiliation, persecution, and a heart filled with bitter grief. Only God knows such things. When spiritualists pray asking who Reverend Moon is, the heart of God can only respond in tears. Whenever I hear this, I simply say, Father, it was nothing. How many tears of gratitude he will shed. After I lived with this heart and showed the world these things, God was freed from his imprisonment. You must all be aware of this. My life goal was to revive Heavenly Father's heart, so that when I enter the spirit world, he will want to welcome and receive me with great joy, as someone worth tens of thousands of times more than Adam. Father has dedicated his life, both here on earth and in the spirit world, to freeing Heavenly Father, to liberating Heavenly Father's heart. And that was the determination that he made when he met Jesus in 1935. And he has never wavered from that determination. And in order to liberate God's heart, he needs to liberate every single human being. I had a conversation with a very wonderful person who is a Christian and a very wonderful Christian, and he was making the point during our conversation that his understanding was that hell is eternal for some people. And I agree that hell is certainly a very, very long time for some people. But how can it be eternal? There has to be at some point where God's creation will be rid of all vestiges of sin and evil, where it will be finally the world that he originally created, and where there is where God's heart can be comforted. That may seem like a very distant future, and perhaps eternal is a good word to describe it, but I'm sure that day will come. And I'm sure that Father will never rest, even in the spirit world, until that day comes. Well, let's take a break now, and we'll come back to start with our news from a Chundigu perspective.
Research and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today. Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. to the best in compact concealed carry. Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, Veterans Day in the United States, the anniversary of the end of World War I. This is the 8th year of Chungi, the 9th month, and the 23rd day of that month. And I'm here with Mr. Ted O'Grady, Son of God. There you go. And Ted has a ream also this morning that he would like to read and to talk about. So go ahead, Ted.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Good to see you this morning.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much. Very brisk this morning, hey?
Rather brisk, yes.
Yeah, it was beautiful this morning when I got up. Of course, the car didn't start right away.
Oh, really?
Which was a bit exciting. So, but beautiful, clear sky, bright stars, and moon in the sky. So, so inspired to be here this morning, Tim. Thank you. So, yes, God was just pecking this rima in my head this morning. John 3:20, John 3:20, John 3:20. So I'll read John 3:20.
All right.
And these are Jesus' words. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. So I think in the context of where we are today in the providence, with evil coming to light after the cosmic perfection blessing on September 23rd, and as we go through the news, obviously we'll see those things increasingly being brought to the light. But there's resistance on the part of evil people, resistance within ourselves. We don't necessarily want to bring our evil deeds to the light because we're not proud of them. And however, in the light of God, there is no hiding. And ultimately, it's to the benefit of and blessing of those of us and those who are evildoers to have those things brought to the light. And therefore, that is the will of God, that we openly confess and repent of our sin, confess the Lord Jesus Christ, and receive the grace of the salvation that God has given to us, which of course is thoroughly undeserved.
Okay, John 3:20. For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was inspired this week as well because November 7th was the 99th birthday of the Reverend Dr. Billy Graham.
Mm-hmm.
And they put together a really nice 5-minute video about his life. And I was recently, when I was in Brazil earlier this year, got interested in some of Reverend Graham's sermons and crusades. And it always struck me how in 30 minutes he could evoke the Holy Spirit to the extent that tens of thousands of people would give their lives to Christ. So I think this morning I just wanted to mention that and thank God for the ministry of Dr. Graham.
Yes, thank you. Let's come to the light. All right, so speaking of the light, and as Ted said, there are a lot of evil is coming to light now, becoming apparent. So we have the Hollywood situation, but also then, they're striking back as well. The evil side is striking back, saying, well, you're not so good yourself. So Roy Moore, the senator, the candidate for the Senate in Alabama, from the Republican Party, who's an evangelical Christian, is being attacked right now, saying that he may have had a inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old girl. I think about 40 years ago or something like that, right? 40 years ago. They had to go way, 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 way back. It's interesting to me that I remember that when Bill Clinton was being accused of rape and affairs and so forth, the argument among the Democrats was, well, personal behavior is not relevant to his performance in office.
Oh, really?
And this was one of the defenses I remember for Bill Clinton. Of course, now they're saying, "Oh, that's all in the past."
All right.
So, either way, at the time. So, but I don't think it was 40 years in his case. So, anyway, the people of Alabama, I'm very interested to see what kind of a decision they will make on this. There's a poll out saying that the Alabama Senate race is tied. So Roy Moore was ahead significantly, but then the Washington Post came out with that article, and so now the poll is saying that it's tied. Moore denies allegations in Hannity interview. Republicans explore extraordinary measures to get rid of Roy Moore. Update: campaign arm severs financial ties. Trump says he'll do the right thing. Lawmaker calls for prosecuting the accusers. So that's the situation in Alabama. The main headline on the Drudge Report this morning is McConnell, that's the Senate Majority Leader, tax messaging mess. That's a Wall Street Journal article we'll get into later. But there's a lot of confusion over, President Trump put out his proposal for the tax reform. The House is now working on theirs because, of course, any kind of a bill that has to do with spending has to originate in the House. And then the Senate, though, is also working on what they want in terms of taxes. And it's very confusing because everyone's talking about something different. And sometimes they say something, but then when you look at it, it's actually something else. So we'll have to see what happens between now and the actual time that they get things together.
It seems to me, Tim, there's this split in the Republican Party. The Republican Party always has a reputation for shooting itself in the foot anyway. But, President Trump exacerbated everything by getting elected. How inconvenient. So, of course, Luther Strange was the candidate put up by the rhinos against Roy Moore. And President Trump went down to Alabama, supported Luther Strange, but he lost by about 9 points. And, of course, Roy Moore, he's quite a strong, you could say, even libertarian candidate, very strong Christian conservative, pro-life. So the issues he carries are really fundamental and critical. I mean, from our point of view, he'd be a person that we'd get behind. So, I mean, it's interesting to see the Republicans just going through this, sort of internal civil war. And in the meantime, they couldn't deal with Obamacare. They're apparently not going to deal with tax cuts. And, of course, there's only a one-vote edge in the Senate. So if Roy Moore goes down, then John McCain's nay vote will pretty much carry the day. So,
John McCain
I might be looking at fun next year. But all the more reason, Tim, for us to get involved locally, really, because as this is happening on the local level, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved.
There is, yes. Yes. I hope everyone voted last Tuesday, but if you, whether you did or not, please get involved by starting to attend your township and your county meetings, township supervisors and the county commissioners' meetings. That's a very, very educational, for one thing, just to find out what's going on in the township and in the county or in the city. Okay, let's go on to, we're going through the headlines now. We'll come back to some of these articles later. Intrigue: Murdoch twice discussed CNN with AT&T CEO. The media executives dreaming of mega mergers get wake-up call. Layoffs at GQ as Condé Nast cuts continue. Well, I'm not so interested in the Condé Nast, but what happens with CNN is very interesting. The King spoke about this, that there are people who want to have CNN cut off from this Time Warner AT&T merger so that it can be purchased by Soros or some arm of Soros. This is the point that he was making yesterday. And well, we'll see what happens. What the others are skeptical that the Justice Department is really going to require that CNN be spun off as a separate, or that it be sold as a part of this Time Warner AT&T merger. The Black Death outbreak, Malawi becomes 10th country on the plague alert, and that started in Madagascar. And Madagascar apparently has about 600 plague cases a year. That's kind of normal, but this year it's different, and it's spreading more widely than it normally does. Boom, 350,000 bottles of wine sold. I guess rather than gold and silver, some people would rather invest in wine. All right.
Well, there's long winter nights.
Long winter nights.
It's always a problem.
I'm not sure who's going to drink this 350,000 bottle of wine. Eminem crashes Taylor Swift party with new albums. Exorcist claims cast out 2,000 demons since began rituals. I read that, and it's an interesting article. We'll get to it. Woman who married mother pleads guilty to incest. Okay. Richard Dreyfuss hit with sexual harassment allegations. And writer Jan Wenner offered work for sex. Guardian editor under investigation. George Takei accused of sexually assaulting male model. George Takei, of course, is a prominent gay rights activist. Not only, especially in Asia, actually, he's been working very hard because he is of Japanese descent. He's been working very hard in East Asia to spread the gay rights, homosexual agenda there. He's visited there, and he's been very prominent there. Atomic Blonde, producer accused of rape, was covered in blood. Quiet paranoia haunts Hollywood. Women launch harassment tip line. New Kevin Spacey accuser tells of wordless assault and then scary anger. Wow, so things are continuing in the Hollywood breakdown there. Hollywood
coming to light.
Coming to light, yes, coming to light. But they're also, if you fire on the enemy is going to fire back, and that seems to be happening with Roy Moore.
We're all coming to light, Tim.
Yes, sooner or later. Yes. High noon. Paramedic overdoses while treating OD patient. This is we'll definitely cover this article. It's a very we need to, if there isn't anyone aware of this yet, need to be very much aware that these opioids that are being used now, where people are overdosing, are causing danger not only for the people who are using them, but also for the people, the first responders, paramedics, and other people who are trying to help these people. In other words, if you come across someone who's OD'd on an opioid, and you touch that person, touch their clothing even, or even breathe the opioid residue, it can cause that person to overdose himself. And this happened in Ohio just a couple of days ago, and we'll be reading about that. Rise and fall of Podesta's, Washington's powerful political brother act. A Russia scandal befalls John and Tony. That's the Wall Street Journal, Bannon Senate minority. We'll see what the Wall Street Journal has to do with that. Greetings from Da Nang. Trump does APEC. We covered that yesterday. I don't think we need to do it again today. But he's declaring a new world trade order. He gave an important speech in Da Nang that we covered yesterday. Melania, meanwhile, stayed in China while the president went to Vietnam, and she did a little bit of touring there, Great Wall, etc. China races to make first contact with aliens using the world's largest dish. China wants to be the superpower in every way. All these movies where the aliens who come to Earth always land in America.
Right.
It's always America that defeats them, all right? And I think China is jealous. They want the aliens to land in China now, at least in the movies.
You know, the aliens might be Asian?
I don't know. Yeah, let's be careful what we say there. But I think China is tired of seeing America save the world. They want to save the world.
Well, just one thing about President Trump, just as an aside, he's such a master at dealing with the media. Remember during his campaign, he pointed to the cameras and say the fake news, down there. But do you know how he puts these little labels on things like Crooked Hillary and fake news, Lion Ted? I mean, but now he's done this with the New World Order, because if you know that the New World Order is the big thing coming from George H.W. Bush, who was the chief demon. He's the author of the New World Order, right? The head of the CIA. Head of the CIA. He was ambassador to the United Nations, by the way.
And ambassador to China. Yes.
Yeah, and blue blood, a relative of the British monarchy, by the way. So, he coined the phrase New World Order. So now Trump is calling it what? The New
World Trade Order.
New World Trade Order. Yes. So now what Trump has done is take that phrase away from the devil.
Yes.
No, seriously.
Yeah, it is.
So now it's a New World Trade Order, which is based upon sovereignty, which is based upon freedom, which is based upon honest competition.
Yeah, in his Da Nang speech, he emphasized sovereignty and independence. He said that the United States will be happy to have a bilateral trade agreement with any country that is in the room, he said, at that time. But he said that this should always be based on sovereignty and independence.
Exactly.
That was something that he repeated at least twice in that speech.
So the people of the world are inspired. I was watching this little thing yesterday on InfoWars. There was this guy out in Germany. There was a climate change convention out there. Evidently, they want to do a climate change regime, like a one-party regime in the world. So he was doing, the alternative climate change. He's calling it fake science, junk science. And here we are in Germany, and he's saying the German people, the patriots of Germany, are all coming up to him that all they want to do is talk about Trump, talk about Trump, talk about Trump. So you remember a few months ago he went to Poland. So that whole area in Eastern Europe, Germany, there's a huge rise, and there's an army rising up of sovereign patriots in this world, and Trump's now doing it in Asia, and China too. I mean, we worry about China with 1.3 billion people, hegemonic power, etc., but they'll break up. They'll break up.
During our every Thursday, the King receives reports from our sanctuary people around the world. And the point that was being made this past Thursday was that through his visit to Japan and Korea, he really changed the perception of the conservatives in those countries. Because until now, the media there, as elsewhere as well, has not had a kind word to say about Trump. But he went there, and a lot of people saw a completely different side of Trump that the media had not presented to them. And this is because, I worked in a Korean paper, and basically the foreign news coverage is based on what the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN say. And those are sort of determined to be sort of the mainstream, and they don't want any of these fringe things, like InfoWars or Breitbart. Those are just extreme fringes that we can ignore, they feel.
You mean the real news?
Right. So they just focus on New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN. And so you can imagine what kind of coverage that Trump has been receiving in these countries until now. But he actually went there, and they were forced to cover him directly, and they saw something quite different. And the Japanese media view of the Trump visit was that, okay, for him, when he comes to Japan, he's coming to deepen ties and to strengthen ties. When he goes to Korea, he's going to educate for the purpose of educating.
Okay.
And when he goes to China, he's going for the purpose of warning the Chinese.
Oh, really?
This was their take. This is the Japanese media's take on his
so what do
Asia trip.
What do they mean by that?
By what?
What do they mean by that? Educate Koreans and
warn the Chinese. Well, educating the Koreans that because the Koreans are right now sort of off on a tangent. on a left-wing tangent right now.
Okay.
Anyway, that was the Japanese media's, the conservative media's take.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's a
conservative
good
media's
thing.
take. Yeah, and warning China that because the United States and China are in some sense cooperating, but as Steve Bannon said, I think Trump is aware that China is long-term, even mid-term, is not a strategic partner, but it is an enemy nation. It is a rival. To put it nicely, more accurately, an enemy nation.
Well, Tim, Father used to talk about heavenly competition. Remember back in the day?
Well, yeah, but heavenly competition means that you're competing. Two people are competing with a common goal in mind, or for the glory of God, or for to offer results to God. But the competition between the United States and China is a competition of good and evil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's not heavenly competition.
I just thought Trump, when I saw
It's a battle.
I saw Trump giving a little speech to the Chinese businessmen, and he just tweaked them. Trump's really good at this, tweaking people. And he's saying that, you guys have been unfair toward us, and it's not going to be that way anymore. And, he gets them kind of going along and with his program. That's the thing about Trump. He is strategic, and, it's great to see.
Yeah, I think he tweeted that China has a huge trade surplus with the United States, but he doesn't blame the Chinese. He blames the past administration. So he criticizes them, but then allows them to save face. That's a kind of a I don't know how well that worked, but I'm sure they understand that's what he's doing. All right, let's take a break, and we'll start going through some of these articles when we come back.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017, 8th year of Chungi still, the 9th month and the 23rd day of this month on the heavenly calendar. A article that was not on the Drudge Report, but which I found in Fox News, which I think is very interesting, is there was a discussion about the Johnson Amendment in the Senate, Civil War in the Pews. Democratic representative says repealing the Johnson Amendment will make Sunni-Shia conflict look like a picnic. The Johnson Amendment, of course, is the amendment to the tax code, which says that religious organizations or churches cannot talk about politics, or basically that's what it says. And the reason it's called Johnson Amendment is that because when Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, later president, but during the time that he was in the Senate, before becoming president, he had a problem with some churches in Texas criticizing him and saying all sorts of bad things about him during the services, during the Sunday services. So he introduced an amendment in the Senate. This was during the 1950s, late 1950s, I believe, which said that, okay, we will give churches tax-exempt status. Until then, churches didn't have tax-exempt status. The donations were not tax deductible on people's income tax returns. So LBJ said, okay, we'll give churches tax-exempt status so that people can deduct their offerings to the churches from their income tax in return for taking away their freedom of speech. So,
great deal, huh?
In return for ministers not being allowed to say political stuff from the pulpit. Well, this has been, if you look at the way this is actually done in practice, of course, many churches, especially African-American churches, tend to say very political things from the pulpit, particularly in support of the Democratic Party. So I'm not really sure how it has been enforced. But anyway, let's see what happened in the Senate here. I think this in the last couple of days. Wisconsin Democrats said that removing the Johnson Amendment, barring political endorsements by preachers and nonprofits, will make the Sunni-Shia conflict in the Middle East look like a picnic.
Oh, really?
Representative Ron Kine, Democrat of La Crosse, made the remarks during a markup of the House version of the Republican tax reform bill. Then Senator Lyndon Johnson, Democrat of Texas, authored the amendment to the U.S. tax code in 1954. President Trump has repeatedly called for it to be removed, and many Republicans have shared the sentiment. Kine was reacting to a motion by fellow Democrat John Lewis of Georgia, who introduced an amendment keeping the Johnson amendment preserved in the tax bill. Kine, who identified himself as a practicing Lutheran, said he views his fellowship in church on Sunday as a way to spend time as a community and as a nation, regardless of political affiliation. I view my church as a sanctuary for my soul, he said. He said that in the age of hyperpartisanship on all sides, preserving the Johnson Amendment would retain worship as an activity free from political disagreements. Repealing the Johnson Amendment will politicize the pulpit. It will create civil war in the pews. It will establish Republican and Democratic churches, synagogues, and mosques overnight, Kine said. Kine said that if the Johnson Amendment is repealed, it is going to make the Sunni-Shia conflict in the Middle East look like a picnic. The conflict between the two major Muslim sects, centuries old, et cetera, et cetera. We already know about that.
That deserves a comment, Tim. That's totally ridiculous, man.
Go ahead.
That's absurd.
Go ahead.
I mean, look, Christianity is based on the love of Jesus Christ, okay? Mm-hmm. America's founded through the love of Jesus Christ. I mean, the entire political body, the political documents of America are founded on Jesus Christ, on Christianity. The American Revolution was preceded, as you know, by the Great Awakening, as Methodism swept the colonies with open-air preaching. The problem with the Johnson Amendment is it totally disempowers Christ. It opens the door to what we have today. It opens the door to pedophilia. It opens the door to free abortion. It opens the door to all kinds of horrendous abuse of the African-American community, for example. And it's quite ironic that you have these people like John Lewis, who's an African-American congressman from Georgia, taking the side of the Johnson Amendment. So, man, African-Americans, just get off the damn plantation. Seriously, and we've got brothers and sisters here who are well off the plantation.
Yeah, so
I don't want to make it racial, but the point is that now's the time for us to really be real and really clearly perceive what's happening here. America is being totally destroyed morally. I'm at the point of total destruction now. So by removing the Johnson Amendment, then churches who are strong, who have a point of view based on the biblical scripture, are going to be able to freely express those things, which they're doing anyway through their preaching in the pulpit, without danger of prosecution, without danger of losing their tax-exempt status.
Certainly, our church in Newfoundland, the Second King, has very strong political views. It feels in the last year's presidential election was strongly against Hillary Clinton, strongly in favor of Donald Trump, and made those views very clear. and continues to make those views very clear. And even when Donald Trump visits countries overseas, our second king asks members in those countries to welcome President Trump, not just President Trump, but also members of his cabinet when they visit countries. When they visit Japan and Korea, especially, our members go out there. And during the recent visit to Japan, we'll be showing some photos and so forth tomorrow, I believe. But our members were during the service. But our members were out there, and as it worked out, they were one of the few people who were actually prepared. They prepared banners and they prepared placards and things like this, and went out there. And so, when the media wanted to interview pro-Trump people, our people were there,
Right.
And our people took put a lot of effort into breaking through the information security surrounding the president's itinerary and finding out exactly where he was going to be, and then making sure that they could be there when he was there. And actually, the police were sympathetic with our people and allowed them into areas that normally civilians were not allowed into, so
Right.
that they could show their banners and their placards, because they were clearly supporting Trump, and they were clearly not. It was clear to the Japanese police that our people were not a security threat to the president. Anyway, we'll be showing this, but they got into some pretty amazing places.
So that's it, really, the feeling of, we're going to do it, we're free to do it. And people say, okay, there's separation of church and state in America. And the liberals will say, okay, we got to keep religion, separate from the government.
Well,
but the purpose of that, Tim, was to keep the government out of religion.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, the separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. The separation between church and state was, I believe, Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to a Baptist church. And this Baptist church was concerned that in the new republic, in the new United States of America that was being formed at that time, that their religious liberties would be curtailed by the state. And so Jefferson wrote them a letter saying, don't worry, we will keep the state out of religion. But he did not say he will keep religion out of the state. And so, and certainly the founding fathers never had any intention of having this wall where religion was excluded from the public forum. Whereas that is what has happened today, where anytime there are people who object to our second king saying anything political from the pulpit.
Really?
Yeah, they said, separation of church and state. Separation of church and state. This is their mantra. And this man from Wisconsin, Ron Kind, also who says he's a Lutheran, and he wants to keep any public discourse out of his church because he says that it'll create a divide, and I may not disagree politically with other members of our church, and I don't want to get into any kind of a political argument while I'm at church.
You better not read the gospel then.
Yeah. But really, we live in a day when political Satanism is very much rearing its head in the world. Political Satanism, where there's a great deal of evil being practiced in the political sphere, and we have to stand up against it. Religious people, Christians, Jews, have to stand up against this, and that. So I think people who want to live in a bubble, they can have their own bubble congregations, I suppose. Where they can say,
do that Sunday night.
Sunday night.
Sunday night.
What's Sunday night?
After the service on Sunday.
I see.
They want to have their bubble thing, they can do it Sunday night.
Well, I was proposing that there could be certain bubble churches.
Oh, yeah?
They put a sign out and say, no political discourse allowed in this church. Right? You can have that church. You can have that kind of a church. People who want to, 2 hours, or what is it, 1 hour, for most churches I think it's 1 hour. For 1 hour a week, there will be no political discourse. No politics allowed. They can put that sign on their door, and they can, and that will. I'm sure there's a market niche for that kind of a church, perhaps. They can do that.
But of course, they're making a political statement by being apolitical.
Right. So Representative Ron Kind can have his church, and he can go there and just sort of keep his mouth shut and tell everybody else to keep their mouths shut while they have their little. Non-political or apolitical service, but to keep it out of all churches is what he wants to do, because I don't want to have a political discourse in my church and during my service. So I want all ministers to be muzzled. I think that is probably not the right way to go.
I think he's got a hidden. I think that guy's
I don't think
got
anyone's going to
agenda.
muzzle the second king, anyways.
No.
Anyway, I wanted to point out this is being discussed in the Senate right now as they work on the tax bill. This is so apparently it was left out of the Republican tax bill. The Johnson Amendment was left out of the Republican tax bill, and now the Democrats are trying to put it back in. And so, if you want to get involved, you can write your congressman.
Yeah.
And say, hey, this is where I stand on this. Please keep the Johnson Amendment out of the new tax bill.
So the Democrats trying to put it into the tax bill to hijack the tax bill, just to create difficulty.
Well, this is one of the things that from this article, it looks like they're trying to pass an amendment to the U.S. tax code to put it back in. To preserve preserved in the tax
Johnson
bill. So from this one article, I may be mistaken, but Kind was reacting to a motion by fellow Democrat John Lewis of Georgia, who introduced an amendment keeping the Johnson Amendment preserved in the tax bill. So the fact that they had to offer an amendment to preserve it suggests that it was not in the existing tax bill that the Republicans are proposing. So we can write our congressmen and senators about that. That would be a good thing to do, actually. You can go to your, if you don't know who your congressman is, then you can just Google who is my congressman. I'm sure that you'll be able to find out, and then write your congressman and give your opinion on this. And when you do, by the way, they're going to check to see. Let's see, is this guy registered?
Right.
Did he vote?
To vote?
Did he vote? So just be aware that your email or your letter will have more force if you've been voting and if you are registered. If you're not even registered, why should they listen to you? If you're not even registered to vote, why are they going to listen to you? Just be aware of that. Okay, so, but even still, or if you're not registered, then please register first and then send your email. That may be a more effective way of doing it. All right, I wanted to next, before we go to our 6 o'clock break, do this opioid thing, because this is really a dangerous thing. This is really a dangerous thing that's happening, because it doesn't just affect, the overdose can be accidental overdose. It's become very, very common, and this is a pretty scary article, actually. This happened in Fairborn, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton. And a Fairborn paramedic driving a suspected overdose patient to the hospital Thursday night began showing symptoms of an overdose himself, prompting his partner to jump into action and stop the ambulance in the middle of the road. So they've got this overdose patient in the back of the ambulance, and they're driving down the highway, and the driver of the ambulance starts to overdose. All right? He didn't take the opioid. He didn't take the opioid. All right? He was just driving the ambulance, and he's starting to overdose from the effects of the opioid of the overdose patient. This is the latest and perhaps the most dramatic case of public safety employees exposed to an opioid. quote, he was not feeling right. He was having issues seeing the speedometer controls. So you're driving down the highway, right? All of a sudden you can't see the speedometer. Said David Rickert, Division Chief for Fairborn Fire. His partner in the back was immediately able to stop the medic in the middle of an intersection. The partner administered Narcan to the firefighter paramedic. Remember our county commissioner, what was his name? Matt Osterberg, yes. Matt Osterberg spoke about Narcan and how he's trying to make it more widely available, because that is the sort of
It's the antidote.
It's the antidote, yeah. And apparently, you can, if someone overdoses, you can somehow administer that, and it works very quickly and very effectively. He and the 49-year-old woman patient were taken to SOIN Medical Center. SOIN, how do you pronounce that? SOIN Medical Center in Beaver Creek, Riker said. The woman and firefighter, whose names have not been released, have recovered. Quote, there's nothing like going to the hospital and seeing one of our guys in the hospital bed who has just been given Narcan to pull him away from dying, unquote, Reichert said. So this is really a matter of life and death. People can just die just from this indirect overdose.
Is it that what's called phenol or something?
Phenol is one of them, yes. And this doesn't say which chemical it was, but phenol is one of the ones that is very dangerous, and this may have been involved here, but it doesn't. This article does not name I think they're still testing, and that may not be known because opioids are synthetic. I think was it last week we talked about the opiates and opioids.
Yeah.
Opiates are natural. They're from the poppy, from the poppy plant, and so things like cocaine is an opiate. What else? Morphine is an opiate.
Heroin. Right?
Heroin is an opiate, whereas opioids are synthetic. And methadone is an opioid, I remember, and so fentanyl, that you just mentioned, is an opioid. But fentanyl especially is many, many times more potent than heroin. And so what people are finding is that heroin dealers, people who sell heroin, are sometimes mixing fentanyl into the heroin so to give their customers a higher high or stronger high, and sometimes just selling fentanyl in place of heroin. And so when the addict or when the customer takes fentanyl thinking that it's heroin, because the same dose will give a far greater high, that customer will overdose, even though they sort of think that, okay, this is my tolerance level, and they sort of use a certain amount, but it's not heroin that they're taking, it's fentanyl, and much stronger, and so they will overdose. And that's happening a lot. And even now, the people who come to save that person will also overdose.
And that's just from touching it, not actually taking it.
Yes, not actually taking it, even breathing it.
It's incredibly potent.
Yes. The woman who overdosed could face charges, he said. It really depends on whether or not this was an accident. He said, my recommendation is we look at assault and inducing panic. The president of the Fairborn Professional Firefighters Union, Local 1235, commended his colleagues. The members of 1235 and the members of the police department did an incredible job, said John Howard. The people at SOIN, the nurse and staff, and the doctors went over and above and treated us amazing. The full details of what happened at SOIN remain unclear, including an apparent incident involving the hospital staff. The hospital's not talking, but apparently once this overdose patient arrived at the hospital, apparently there was at least one or maybe even several staff of the hospital who also suffered the effects of the opioid. And they're not talking about what exactly happened, but it sounds like something did happen. We were advised that there was some issues at the hospital, but I don't think anyone up there is at liberty to speak for SOIN, Bennington said. However, the police captain added, if we can get evidence to prove that she, the overdose patient, willfully overdosed, potentially those charges could carry over to the hospital. Wow. So it wasn't just the paramedics, not just the first responders, but when they took the patient to the emergency room, some people in the emergency room also suffered these effects. This is really scary.
I mean, it's very scary.
Yeah.
Why would those type of drugs even be manufactured?
Many are
What's
being
the-
manufactured in China.
Okay, let's get
Yes.
back to heavenly competition here.
Not heavenly.
Right.
We can take heavenly out of that. This is a battle between good and evil.
But
Elizabeth,
I mean, you think it's intentional. I mean, the whole idea about they want us dead.
yeah.
You know, the globalists want us dead anyway, so why not just, poison us? I mean, this is
Well,
actually...
remember the Opium Wars in China in the 19th century, where basically the British
The Brits did that. The
Did
Brits,
it?
Brits are, the Brits taught everyone how to do this, by the way. Divide and conquer. Just ask my Irish Catholic ancestors, they'll tell you all about that.
yes.
So, say what goes around comes around.
I think it's coming around. As Elizabeth Long, a spokeswoman for Kettering Health Network, had declined multiple requests for comment by phone before a news conference. A spokesman said he believes several employees at Soin were affected. He retracted the statement at the press briefing and said the incident was still under investigation. So for some reason, they're keeping a secret here.
Really?
Yeah. So they said something, but then they retracted it later on. This is very, very suspicious. And fentanyl, or they're naming something called carfentanil. I'm not sure what that is. But this is used to sedate elephants and other large animals.
Elephants.
A small quantity of these powerful drugs absorbed through the skin or inhaled by a human can lead to overdose and death.
Wow. It's incredibly powerful, huh?
All right. So that's the world that we're living in, folks. That's the world that we're living in. We have to be very, very careful. All right, so let's take a 5-minute break now, and we'll be back with more news from a Tonic perspective. Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017, Veterans Day. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for the second king of Chaniguk, and I'm here with Mr. Ted O'Grady, Son of God. And let's look at we've talked a little bit about the taxes, and about, in the last hour we talked about the effort to restore the Johnson Amendment to the tax bill in the House. And the Senate also is working on its tax bill. And the New York Times headline says, Senate plan could increase taxes on some middle-class workers. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, acknowledged on Friday that the Republican tax plan might result in a tax hike for some working Americans, saying he misspoke days earlier when he said that nobody in the middle class is going to get a tax increase under the Senate bill. So I think, I'm always cognizant that civics is no longer being taught in school. So maybe we need to explain that.
What's a senator?
That's a senator. Ted is referring to the fact that we saw yesterday that in the trial of Senator Menendez in New Jersey, who's being tried for corruption, which, by the way, is not being covered by the mainstream media.
Really?
they cover Roy Moore, but not Menendez. Okay. The case went to the jury, and the jury sent out a question saying, so what is a senator? And the judge refused to answer. He said, rely on your own memory. So anyway, I'm sure that, aside from that one juror, everybody knows what a senator is.
More or less.
But anyway, right now the Republicans, because they have control of Congress, they want to make some major changes to the tax code, to the laws about taxes, and so and the Constitution says that all bills that involve spending have to originate in the House of Representatives, and so the House is working on its bill, and eventually hopefully they're going to pass something, and then once they do that, they're going to send it to the Senate, and the Senate will come up with pass its version, and then after that, the two sides, there'll be different content, and so then after that, the House and Senate will meet in a committee. A few people from each side of Congress will meet in a committee, and then they will come up with a bill that will be passed in both the House and the Senate with exactly the same language. And once that happens, then that goes to the president, and he can decide whether to sign it or to veto it. So right now we're in that early stage where the House is working on its version. The Senate, even before the House bill comes to it, they're beginning to work on their version too, because eventually they're going to have to do it anyway. And they want to hurry this along because I think they want to finish this before the end of the year or something like that. That's the sort of the Republican idea. They don't have to. That's a self-imposed deadline, but that's what they are working on. So when Mitch McConnell talks about the Senate bill, that's what he's talking about. And so apparently he said earlier that nobody in the middle class is going to get a tax bill increase under the Senate bill, but he said, I misspoke on that in an interview Friday with the New York Times. You can't guarantee that absolutely no one sees a tax increase, but what we are doing is targeting levels of income and looking at the average in those levels, and the average will be tax relief for the average taxpayer in each of those segments. So as long as you make sure that you are average.
Oh, is that the idea?
Be an average person.
Mediocre.
Mediocre person.
Right? There you go. It's like William Devlin was talking on the King's Report earlier this week, right? About America's opted for mediocrity.
Yes.
Live recklessly. But I think what they're referring to here is the taking out the deductions for state and local taxes.
Well, that's one of the things that's being discussed, and I think that's actually back in the House version.
They put it back in.
They put it back in, yes, because people from New York and California have a lot of votes.
Massachusetts.
Well, especially New York and California because they have such a large population.
Oh, right, okay.
All right, they have a lot of votes, and they also have high state taxes.
Okay.
And so they don't like that because if that were to pass, people would move out of New York. They would move to like Pennsylvania. We're kind of average, We're kind of in terms of tax rates. We're kind of average, but people would move to lower states with lower tax rates, and New York and California don't want that. And so I think it's going to be pretty difficult to eliminate that deduction. But we'll see. We'll see.
It might be good though in a
see
weight
what
center when you
happens.
get New Yorkers
I think
and
it would be very
Californians
good.
moving out of those
They're
states.
heavenly competition. That is where you would
moving
have
out of those states. Like I was working in Milford this past week, getting to know people in the area, and there's a lot of expats in this area. People that have crossed passed through the wall,
Right.
of the Delaware River, and and you come over here, and like the King told me one time, hey Ted, it's different over here. And you start breathing the air, you start looking around, you see the beautiful mountains, you start seeing people, carrying their conceal and carry, and freedom. You start to breathe freedom, and that might be a good thing for those.
Well, except for one local resident that told me, he said, yes, we don't mind people moving here from New York and New Jersey. The problem is they come here and they keep voting the same way.
That is a problem.
That is a problem.
That's why we got to get involved in local politics.
Yes, absolutely. Republican lawmakers have been in a dash to devise and pass a tax overhaul that would mark their most significant achievement since taking control of Congress. President Trump and Republican leaders have outlined two main objectives for the rewrite: cutting taxes for American businesses and for the middle class. The legislation reduces tax rates on individuals and businesses while eliminating some tax breaks to make up for lost revenues. It is meant to accelerate economic growth and increase wages for workers. But the House and Senate bills would cut the corporate tax. Both the House and Senate bills would cut the corporate tax rate to 20% from 35%, and provide business tax benefits such as the ability to immediately expense purchases of equipment. The Times analysis using the open source software TaxBrain found that roughly 1/4 of families in the middle class would see their taxes increase in 2018 by about $1,000 on average. By 2026, the share seeing an increase would rise slightly to about 1/3, and the average increase would rise to about $1,600. For the majority of middle-class families that receive a tax cut, the average savings would be about $1,300 in 2018 and $1,700 in 2016. So here, they have a graph here, and I don't know how, but always when they do this, you have to see what data they put in there, and that the data is not given here. So the Times did an analysis. But I don't, without seeing the data, we cannot really judge the validity of that analysis. They're only giving us the results of their analysis, not the actual data.
It was interesting on Thursday at the Freedom Society meeting with Kukchinim.
You're okay. Talk about that.
So we came up, so I came in like 5 minutes late, and so I didn't know what was going on. But there was an older gentleman on the video screen talking about seeding clouds, like it was weather manipulation.
Right,
He had been in the military in the Vietnam War, and evidently they had done this to weaponize the weather. And evidently it's quite simple and inexpensive to do, right?
Yeah. I think you just basically drop dry ice, don't you?
Yeah, something very simple, inexpensive to do, and they knew how to do it. And this guy was very knowledgeable, and of course he hadn't really said anything about it for like decades. So then we were, talking about this, and everyone just kind of watched it and sat there and watched it, took it all in, and then sort of the context of these big hurricanes that have come in and causing billions and billions of dollars of damage, right? So then Kuchinim asked, well, what do you guys think of this? And someone said this, someone said that. Oh, we might save money, if we could do it, if we could reduce these hurricanes, because the guy was saying if a hurricane is under 100 miles an hour, then basically it eliminates damage, most damage. So, and it's apparently relatively easy to do that and simple to do that. So Kukchinim is just sitting there waiting, and someone says this, someone says that, and finally he just says, what it's really saying, guys, is that if the government just gets out of everything and we let the private market work, and we have the Chonilgut Constitution here, we'll have the kingdom of heaven. Very simple. And so, we're kind of in the learning curve here of taking this all in, right? But in regard to this, you're talking about the tax bill and what's going on here, right? Even without the tax cut, there's been this incredible rise in the stock market, $5 trillion or whatever.
It's the best first
Right.
year of any president since World War II.
Right. So this is based on Donald Trump's personality. Actually, there's very little that's actually been done substantively,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's the point, though. Very little
Yeah.
has been done.
Yeah, but
Government's staying out of the way.
That's Kuchinim's point. But think about it. If tax cuts actually come in, we might go to 5% growth. So think about this. Think about the dynamism of human beings, the dynamism of American society based on freedom and liberty and Jesus Christ. Once we get the government off our backs and we have the Chattanooga Constitution and everything devolves down to the local level and we all get mobilized and we take responsibility, it's just going to... And then Poland's going to get on board. And then Germany's going to get on board. And Vietnam's going to get on board. And these countries in Africa that have been suffering so long are going to get on board and take control of their own situation.
Just to remind you that in the Chattanooga Constitution, there's no income tax or property tax, including corporate income tax. And the main source of taxation is the sales tax. There's also use tax and excise tax. But the total amount, the total revenue of the federal government cannot exceed 10% of the gross domestic product. By comparison, for example, today the federal revenue is about 25%, between 20 and 25%, I think. May have gone down a little bit, but it's still above 20%, 25% level. And when you add state and local taxes, it's in the 40% range. So that is the real tax reform that we're looking for.
Exactly.
Yes.
But you think about it, Tim, freedom's kind of scary.
Yes, freedom is scary. That's true.
God says to be free.
Yes.
But then you're also responsible.
Yes.
No excuses when you're free. I'm free and I'm responsible.
Yes.
I'm responsible for what I do, what I don't do.
Yes.
Everything.
Yes.
And that's sovereignty. That's kingship and queenship.
The problem with freedom is that when people come out of slavery and they say, okay, now you're free, they don't know what to do with it. And they are still expecting things to be given to them. And when things are not given to them, they say, okay, when are you going to start giving me things? It was, oh, you're free. You can do it yourself. But the power is lying in front of them. All they have to do is pick up and use it. But they keep saying, give me power, give me power. Well, it's right there in front of you. As soon as you pick it up, you'll have it. But give me power. When are you going to give me power? You guys still have all the power. We don't have the power. It's right there in front of you. You have more power than we do. It's right there in front of you. But give me power. When are you going to decentralize?
So we're working out these issues on the micro and macro, aren't we, Tim?
Yes, we are. But I think more so on the micro than the macro, perhaps. Sometimes it seems.
No, I think the macro is really stuck in this. If you think about, the African American population, for example. The King talked about this with Jesse Lee Peterson, didn't he? His Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, who, really honestly expressed his struggle, right? His fear, disempowerment, and how he gained a victory internally through his faith in Jesus. And he stepped into that and now is trying to help, other African Americans or Americans in that situation. So, all we're experiencing on the micro is the same thing the macro is going through.
Well, let's look at the situation in Alabama now. With why don't we take a break before we do that? Let's take a break and we'll come back with looking at the situation and what's going to happen there in Alabama. Taking a break now.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Carr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for the second Kim Hyung Jin Moon, and I'm here with Mr. Ted O'Grady, Son of God.
Okay.
I wanted to look at an editorial in the Wall Street Journal this morning about the situation in Alabama, and it's titled "Bannon's Senate Minority." Voters may have to be the jury on the charges against Roy Moore, it says. Judge Roy Moore was always a time bomb for the Senate Republicans, which is why most GOP leaders opposed him in the primary, including President Trump, actually. But Alabama Republicans nominated him anyway, and now the state's voters will have to assess allegations against Mr. Moore that are among the worst that can be leveled. Mr. Moore, 70 years old, is vociferously denying a Washington Post report that he made sexual advances on a 14-year-old girl when he was a 32-year-old district attorney in 1979. So how many years would that be? 21, 38 years? Almost 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
a long time ago.
The now adult woman, Leigh Korfman, is on the record with considerable detail, and corroborating witnesses say she told them about the events at the time or at points since. She has little to gain from coming forward now. The charges are disqualifying for public office if true, even if the statute of limitations has long expired. At least the Wall Street Journal knows how to spell statute. I see many other places where it's spelled statue.
Statue. Okay. They're taking all those down now, though, aren't they, Tim? I heard Marion Barry's getting a statue put up.
Yes.
In Washington, D.C.
Yes. Take down Thomas Jefferson and put up Marion Barry. But anyway, let's maintain our focus here. The charges may be unprovable at this remove, but they will certainly hang over Judge Moore's campaign until the December 12 special Senate election, and afterwards if by some chance he wins. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and other Republicans have called on Mr. Moore to withdraw as the nominee if the charges are true, and the national GOP has cut off funding for the campaign. But no one can force him to stand down, and Mr. Moore is trying to rally supporters by calling the story a political attack. I don't know Ms. Korfman from anybody, Mr. Moore told radio host Sean Hannity on Friday. The allegations are completely false. I believe they're politically motivated, unquote. He's backed by Breitbart, the website run by former White House aide Steve Bannon that supported Mr. Moore in the primary. The truth is that Mr. Bannon is a partial architect of this mess. He'll support any Republican candidate who promises to vote against Mr. McConnell for Senate leader. And when that's your only political standard, you end up with oddballs and misfits as candidates. Remember that the Wall Street Journal is a globalist
Is that the
publication.
Wall Street Journal? That's BS right there,
Yeah.
because Roy Moore has a long history of respectable service in Alabama. Apparently, he liked younger girls and he courted them. Even the allegation here, I mean, not to defend him, if but just to put a little bit of context here. We're not talking about accusations of pedophilia. We're talking about courting. We're talking about courting girls a bit underage. We're also talking about the American South 40 years ago. Okay, so we kind of have to bear these things in mind as we look at it.
Well, 14-year-old girl, 1979. I mean, American South in 1979. This is not the 19th century. I mean, I was there in 1979.
Right.
I was alive. You were probably also alive.
Yeah.
And I think in the culture where I lived in 1979 or even 1969 when I was in high school, a 30-year-old man courting a 14-year-old girl was not acceptable.
No. It's not acceptable, but apparently Mr. Moore did like younger girls and courted them with some certain decorum, and he apparently married a younger lady and has made a family and grandchildren and has made a life out of that. So I just think we need to bear that in mind with the fact that this is such a politically loaded issue. These are all decisions that the voters in Alabama will have to make, and I'm interested to see what decision they will make. They may elect him anyway. Apparently, the poll right now is that he's tied. So if you're tied in spite of this kind of an accusation, that's actually pretty good. Yeah.
You know, if they give you their best shot and you're still standing, you may actually win. You may actually survive the onslaught.
Of course, really just looking at it, Tim, politically, I mean, the fact is you got the rhinos on one side that hate him, that are fighting for control of the Republican Party. I mean, they may, McConnell and his guys, whatever, may just want to use this issue to neutralize Trump or ultimately get rid of Trump, or bring back the Bush era next year, get Trump impeached with the 25th Amendment, whatever. It's totally loaded political atmosphere.
That is absolutely behind this. This is certainly being done in the context of hardball politics. And when Wall Street Journal says that she has nothing to gain by coming forward now, I don't think that's true. Obviously, this is a part of the anti-Trump attack. But it's a pretty good attack.
It is a serious issue, obviously.
Yes. But on the other hand, as I mentioned the last hour, I think when Clinton was, president and being, in the Monica Lewinsky thing and everything else, of course, Lewinsky was an adult. But at that time, Democrats were saying, oh, well, personal behavior has nothing to do with the competence to fulfill the duties of the office. That was their defense back then. So where is that defense now? So the Democrats are being hypocritical. But, hypocrisy is part of politics. This is part of the norm. So we'll have to see what the people of Alabama do. Anyways, where were we now? Judge Moore twice lost his Alabama Supreme Court seat because he refused to enforce court orders. So his potential for self-implosion wasn't news. But those were court orders, for example.
Federal court orders, right?
Well, they were to remove the Ten Commandments from the courthouse. Right. Yes. So that fact is missing from this editorial.
He's also strongly pro-life, I think.
Yes, he is. And also strongly pro-gun. In fact, when he was accused of not being pro-gun, he brought a pistol to one of his final rallies and so waving it around. Now, from a gun safety point of view, that's not a good idea, all right? So if you're going to take a pistol to a rally, it should be in the holster and not be pulled out. But anyway, that was an effective demonstration of his pro-gun stance. Luther Strange, the current senator who was appointed by Alabama's former governor to replace Attorney General Jeff Sessions, is every bit as conservative as Mr. Moore without the flakiness, which actually kind of is not true. He'd be running away with the special election while Mr. Moore was barely ahead of the Democratic nominee Doug Jones even before the Washington Post story. A write-in campaign for Mr. Strange would be desirable, though it's a long shot. If Mr. Moore stays in the race, Alabama voters will have to be the jury that renders a verdict on the charges against him, as our friends at the New York Sun put it. As for Mr. Bannon, we're beginning to suspect that he wants Republicans to lose the Senate because it's easier to rage in opposition. He may get his wish. Next year in the Senate, in the midterm elections, the Republicans are in a very, very advantageous position because out of the, I think, 33 or 34 senators who are going to be up for election next year, about 25 are Democrats.
Really?
Yes, and so the Democrats have to defend all 25 of those seats just to maintain their current position in the Senate. And so the Republicans are in a favorable position, especially since a number of those Democrats are representing states that voted for Trump last year.
Oh, really?
So it is almost inconceivable that the Democrats will take over the Senate after next year's elections. But, people are saying, you never know.
Yeah.
Look what's happening in Alabama. Because Alabama is supposed to be a very solidly Republican state.
We also saw the governor races in Virginia and New Jersey as well this week went Democrat.
Well, yeah, and the Democrats are making a big thing of that. Of course, Virginia goes back and forth between Republican and Democrat. When I was in Virginia, it was almost all Republican. All the statewide offices were Republican. Now they're all Democrat. So it goes back and forth. And I think President Trump has a point there where he said that the problem with the Republican candidate in Virginia was that he did not embrace Trumpism.
Right.
He didn't
mobilize the base, basically.
He wanted to be a mediocre. He wanted to be mediocre.
Gillespie. Yeah,
Gillespie, yes.
Yeah, he's happy in his mediocrity.
And mediocre didn't work. Yeah.
But you know what it comes down to, Tim? Again, it comes down to the evangelicals.
It does.
The people who are believers, and they're not going to be mobilized by anyone mediocre.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
When Father was working politically in the late 80s that I was involved in, and we were very involved, it was all about people who loved the country, who wanted to save the country, who saw that America's going down the drain. And they got mobilized politically to support the candidates that are going to be on board with that. If someone's mediocre and just has a political agenda that doesn't inspire anyone, it's not going to mobilize the voters. So Gillespie, for him to win, this is why Bannon, the whole thing about Bannon understands this. He marshaled the populism during Trump's campaign and got Trump elected. So this idea that Bannon wants to destroy the Republican Party and create a minority party just to satisfy his ego, that's total crap.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, that's part of the hardball politics. Those kinds of charges are leveled, and people. The way that this can be worked out is for people to wake up and really make their decisions based on real facts and real understanding of what is the best interest of the country. Because the establishment Republican leaders, the establishment Democratic leaders, they're trying to maintain the status quo, the system that they've created. Where leadership goes back and forth, but basically it's the same, just different faces. And so if Americans are to take back America, we really need to make wise and informed choices and awake, and not be swayed by these tactics that are being used by the establishment to try and keep Americans from really voicing or really taking control, voicing their own opinions and taking control. That's what the establishment fears the most. If the Roy Moore charges are true, it's certainly a very serious thing. But do we want then to give that seat to a Democrat? I think people have to think very carefully about that. I think if I were in Alabama, I would still vote for Roy Moore, even if the charges were true. I would still vote for him.
I would do that too.
Yeah. Not that I approve of 30-year-old men dating 14-year-old girls. That's certainly not. But he's not doing it now.
No, who knows the real situation with it? Do you like younger women, Tim?
My wife is actually older than me by 5 days.
Oh, okay.
By 5 days.
But yeah.
We have almost the same birthday.
We're free and responsible. We need self-discipline, right?
She's going to scold me for saying that on the air. I'm sorry. At least I didn't say it in Korean.
But what is really indicative, Tim, of the whole thing is that the only thing that the left has is to weaponize identity politics or some sort of divisive issue, to create division, to create a horror show, which scares people, and then destroy.
Yeah, well, yes, they're destroy by any means possible is what they're doing. Yes,
basically destruction politics.
Let's look at an article that shows how, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out, Steve Bannon and the Breitbart News that he runs is very much supporting Roy Moore. So I want to look at an article on Breitbart News to see how they are supporting him, how they're defending him. And the headline here is Alabama ABC affiliate can't find one voter who believes WAPO's report about Roy Moore in Man on the Street segment. During a segment that aired on Friday's broadcast in Birmingham, Alabama, ABC affiliate WBMA 3340's 5 p.m. local news political reporter Lauren Walsh sought out voters in Columbiana, Alabama to gauge their reactions to the Washington Post report that alleged Republican U.S. Senate hopeful Roy Moore engaged in inappropriate conduct with 4 teenage girls more than 34 years ago. They put alleged in the wrong. He's not an alleged Senate hopeful. It's the inappropriate conduct that's alleged. But anyway, I'm sorry. Once an editor, you're always an editor. None of the respondents, according to Walsh, had told her they believed the Post reporting. It's hard to believe the events that transpired yesterday, Gordon Fluker of nearby Wilsonville, Alabama, said to Walsh about the Washington Post report. Fluker's response was the standard, according to Walsh. Out of all the voters he spoke with Friday in Columbiana, we didn't find one voter who believed the Washington Post report about Moore, she said. Columbiana is the county seat of Shelby County, a county that is the home to many of Birmingham's southern suburbs. The county is very Republican, and in last year's presidential election, it went to Donald Trump by a 72 to 23% margin. In the GOP primary and the subsequent runoff for next month's special election won by Moore, Shelby County won for the opponent, Luther Strange, in both instances. Strange defeated Moore by 9 points in the GOP primary held in August. In the runoff, a month later, Strange topped Moore by a 55 to 45 margin, I guess, in Shelby County. Moore faces Democrat Doug Jones on December 12th for the U.S. Senate seat formerly held by Jeff Sessions. So so that's interesting.
It is, yeah.
That's interesting. So this is the suburbs of Birmingham, where this television reporter, ABC affiliate, so I think she was probably motivated to find people who would attack Moore, say, I'm not going to vote for him, I'm disappointed, et cetera, but she couldn't find anybody like that. So I don't know. Maybe it's a question of the reporter's competence, or maybe, Alabama voters are, maybe it hasn't sunk in yet. We'll have to see.
I think they're skeptical of anything that comes from the north.
Yeah, that's certainly
the
true.
South will rise again, Tim.
Yes. My relatives in Arkansas, damn Yankee was one word. The Yankee word, they never said Yankee, it was always damn Yankee. So that is the feeling among many people, I think, still in the South, yeah. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back with more news from a Tony perspective after this.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology, it's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017. We're in the 8th year of Chungi, 9th month, in the 23rd day. And Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chungi, Hyung Jin-moon. I'm here with Mr. Ted O'Grady, Son of God. Let's look at just one more loose end to tie up on the Roy Moore thing. Well, the opinion poll here, where it shows that Moore is tied basically with his Democratic rival. This is from a BuzzFeed News. Polls shows Alabama race tied after allegations against Roy Moore. According to a poll commissioned by Decision Desk and conducted by firm Opinion Savvy, the Republican nominee is now locked in a dead heat with Democrat Doug Jones following an accusation that Moore initiated a sexual encounter with a minor years ago. A new poll shows the Senate race in Alabama is now too close to call following an accusation that Republican nominee Roy Moore pursued a sexual encounter with a 14-year-old girl in 1979. Moore and Democratic Doug Jones are tied at 46% in the survey, which was conducted Thursday. That came. I think that's the same day that the Washington Post story came out. By Opinion Savvy and commissioned by Decision Desk HQ in the aftermath of a bombshell Washington Post report. The results also suggested that a write-in campaign by another Republican could tip the seat to Democrats, a prospect that once seemed far-fetched in deep red Alabama. A three-way race with Moore, Jones, and interim Senator Luther Strange as a write-in candidate would favor Jones with roughly 44%, with Moore by 41%, and Strange at 12%. The poll surveyed 515 likely voters by landline and mobile and has a margin of error of 4 points. So actually, the results that are within that margin of error favor Jones 44% in a three-way race, for example. It could be as little as 40%, and Moore could be 45%. So it's within that margin of error. The Strange scenario is important because Moore has denied the accusation and shows no signs of exiting the race. And based on Alabama election law, it appears to be too late to replace him on the December special election ballot anyway. There has been a buzz in the 24 hours since the Post story broke about Strange or someone else attempting a write-in bid, but the poll validates concerns that such a candidate could split the GOP vote with Moore. Strange, despite the backing of President Donald Trump and much of the Republican establishment, lost his September primary to Moore. Okay, we know that. Most of those surveyed Thursday, 82% were aware of the woman's accusation, and 54% do not believe Moore should withdraw from the race because of it. 35% do. The allegations appear to have cost Moore with women. About 39% would vote for him now, down from 46% after this September primary. Moore's standing with the men remained the same at 55%. BuzzFeed has partnered with. Okay, so yeah, that was that's sort of the initial reaction by Alabama voters that they're still tied on that. Whereas the Republicans are trying extraordinary ways to get rid of him. Well, this is going on, of course, in the context of more and more people accusing Hollywood moguls and directors of things. But this is a fight over a seat in the Senate, and so that's why this one is particularly important. This is, I'm looking at the New York Times again now. Senate Republicans scrambled on Friday to find a way to block Roy S. Moore's path to the Senate, exploring extraordinary measures to rid themselves of their own nominee in Alabama. After accusation. So this is sovereignty, local sovereignty versus globalist control. You know, the people in Alabama may actually vote for him, but the people in Washington who are supposed to be in the same party are trying to figure out ways to block him. Let's see here, get to the meat of the story here. In a flurry of phone calls, emails, and text messages discussed fielding a write-in candidate, pushing Alabama's governor to delay the December 12th special election, or even not seating Mr. Moore at all should he be elected. Because even if he's elected, then the question will be, will the Senate accept him? Because the Senate is allowed under the Constitution to refuse to seat him. Yeah, that's
Really?
possible under the Constitution.
The majority vote or something?
Yeah, I think it's a majority or something like that. I'm not sure if a majority of 2/3 or whatever, but in the Constitution it does say that the in the House and the Senate they can determine their own membership, basically what it says. So yeah. In an interview, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, declined to say whether he would agree to seat Mr. Moore should he win. Mr. McConnell deferred a question about a possible write-in campaign by Senator Luther Strange, the current occupant of the seat, to Mr. Strange.
I think honestly, they're just meddling. Really,
Yeah,
Tim. You know, internal good Constitution, right? This can't happen. The whole problem is, well, maybe you
I'm
tell
not
me
sure.
the expert,
Yeah, I'm not sure if that. I'd have to look at the. I don't have it with me.
Okay.
Constitution, but whether if someone is elected, can they be seated? I have to check.
okay.
Yeah. Can the Senate refuse to? Because in the past, I think who was it in the 60s or 70s? There was a member of Congress. I can't remember House or Senate, where
Was it Wilbur Mills from Arkansas? Remember?
I don't think it was. I'm not thinking of Mills. Powell seems to be the name that comes to mind. Clayton Powell. Maybe people watching, I'm sure, already know what it is that I'm trying to find. Yeah, Adam Clayton Powell.
That's
Adam
right.
Clayton
from
Powell.
Harlem.
Yeah, from Harlem. Yeah.
On corruption
And,
charges, right?
Yeah, he was in corruption charges, and he lost his seat in 1970. He was reelected and regained the seat in 1969. United States Supreme Court ruling in Powell versus McCormick. He lost his seat in 1970. So anyway, there was a big thing about him being possibly excluded from the House.
I don't think they did it, though, did they?
Oh, he was defeated in the Democratic primary for re-election in 1970 by Charles Rangel. Okay, so, but there was a great deal of controversy back then about possibly the House voting him out, sort of excluding him from the House. But eventually, he was defeated in the primary. So yeah, the Senate does have that power to refuse to seat him, even if he is elected.
I mean, they're being very sanctimonious here. I mean, all they have to do really say is let Alabama decide.
Yeah.
They're a sovereign state.
Yeah.
And this has been the whole argument since the Civil War.
Yeah.
Tim, you're a Southerner, so you know this. I remember reading a history authored by Clarence Carson. You might be familiar with it. It's a 6-volume history of the South from the Southern point of view. And the real legitimate issue of states' rights versus federal power. And that's really at the core of this also. Alabama has the right to elect whom they want to elect. And the Republican Party, they can, express their opinions about it, but they're not really in a position to threaten Alabama.
Well, they will. They will.
They're trying to.
But as you say, this is an issue of local sovereignty. This is an issue of local sovereignty. It depends on the people of Alabama whether they seek to assert their sovereignty and elect him anyway. But we'll see what happens in December. That's going to be a very interesting election. This is going to be pretty interesting.
But I mean, they're so transparent, Tim, with John McCain coming out immediately saying this guy should just leave.
Well, I'm sure they had foreknowledge of this story coming out in the Washington Post. I'm sure that even, where did the Washington Post? How is it the Washington Post came up with this story? I mean, who helped them get this story? Was it Mitch McConnell? Was it John McCain? I wouldn't put it past them.
No.
At all. They may be the source of this story in the first place. All right. Meanwhile, There's a 23-year-old young exorcist, or young woman actually, who has been casting out devils and demons since she was 13 years old. And she battles Satan and claims to have cast out over 2,000 demons since she began her ritual at 13 years old.
Wow.
We need more people like this, I think. Yeah.
Maybe I'll use her around here.
Armed with just a Bible, cross, and holy water, and a few choice words. The young woman says she has cast out demons of voodoo and witchcraft in 23 different countries.
Wow. You know, the king has talked a lot about witchcraft, talk about the burning of the witches and the reality of Satanism.
Yeah. Satan is very real, and demons are very real. And this lady sounds like she may be a genuine thing. Because, God gives this kind of a gift to people. So it's very possible that it's very likely that this woman is the real thing. Many university students spend their time partying and dating the opposite sex, but that's not the case for 23-year-old Bryn Larson from Arizona, who battles Satan and performs dramatic exorcisms to banish demons between her lectures. Bryn is a part of a glamorous trio, along with Savannah, 26, and Tess Schirkenbach, 23, who call themselves the All-American Exorcists, after renaming from the Teenage Exorcists.
Oh, really?
They work as a badass Bible-bashing squad who claim to rid people of the devil inside them. The aspiring doctor, who has performed 2,000 exorcisms since she started at the tender age of 13 after being trained up by her dad, Reverend Bob Larson. Armed with just a Bible, cross, and holy water and a few choice words, the young woman says she cast out demons of voodoo and witchcraft and many others in 23 different countries. And here's a photograph of her. I don't know if the tech team can show it, but she doesn't look like an exorcist, I'll tell you that. She looks more like a bikini model. Bryn admitted that the act of removing a demon can become very physical at times. Speaking to the Sun Online, Bryn said, "We've had to stop exorcisms because we haven't had enough people to hold on to them. It becomes too violent and we've had to regroup. We don't want anybody to get hurt. At the same time, to get that demon out is evil. If it is evil, it wants to come at you. Sometimes it does have to get very physical. My main goal is I don't want them to get hurt. Sometimes that's what it takes to get the demon out. Dad has had his ribs cracked before. I've taken a punch or two, but nothing very serious. Russian demons are very violent. Really? So we've seen some very spectacular 12 people hanging on to one-person exorcisms."
Wow, in Russia.
Bryn said that exorcisms are not about levitating and heads spinning around, as many people believe, but she can definitely see the evil manifest in someone who is possessed. She recalled, "I'll never forget the first time I looked at someone and saw that evil looking back at me. It's almost indescribable. It's palpable. It's in their eyes. It's in their body language. You can almost sense it in your spirit. This is not something being crazy or acting. When a demon is up, it is very obvious, unmistakable." Thankfully, her dad was on hand to encourage the then 13-year-old tackle the demon who was manifesting in a man in South Africa. She said it was a powerful demon of voodoo. Dad was working with it, and then all of a sudden it looked at me, and it was just that evil emanating. I knew if it could hurt me, it would, but it couldn't. That moment proved pivotal for Bryn, and she set out to make it her life's work alongside her religious father and 2 friends. She confessed, "Once I cast that demon out, it was like, wow, this isn't as hard or crazy as it looks." God did all the heavy lifting, and I'm glad that she gives the glory to God. God did all the heavy lifting, and I just had to be there and do my part. It was very empowering to see that evil and being able to fight it with the goodness of God. Wow.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Bryn warned that she has seen people with multiple demons during her time, and it can often take more than an hour, a 1-hour session to rid them of the evil. Wow. She explained, "We deal with anyone who comes to us. I've seen it all, demons of lust, anger, witchcraft. There is a specific demons such as Jezebel. It's complicated because someone can spend their whole life getting demons, having issues and getting messed up. You might cast out a demon on witchcraft, but you might have a demon of lust or anger, so you have to deal with that as well. And then a lot of people come to see Dad and expect to spend an hour casting the demon out, and you are good to go. Once the demon has been exorcised out of someone, Bryn said that they have to be careful it doesn't go into someone else in the room. Yeah. She said, it's a very valid concern. When we cast out demons, we always tell them to go back to the pit of hell. We pray and tell them where to go and and they have to obey. Thankfully, a demon can't just jump into someone, so don't go around thinking, oh my gosh, it can jump into me at any time. A demon has to have a right to attack.
Condition.
The reciprocal base.
That's exactly right.
Heard of that before?
Yeah, we have. We know the truth,
Yes.
don't we? Even the devil knows the truth.
Yes, has to have a base, the reciprocal base. Yes, the principle. Bryn said a demon can become part of your life through multiple outlets, including dabbling in the occult, through alcohol and drug abuse, and even sometimes through the music you listen to.
Could be anything.
She explained the Bible talks about things to avoid, such as witchcraft. If you are getting your palm read by a psychic, reading horoscopes, or if you go to see a psychic, if you play with a Ouija board, if you try and cast spells, that's opening the door up to the devil. That's giving him a right to come into your life and attack you. So witchcraft is a huge area. We see a lot of torment and possession. We had that gentleman who was in the Satanist cult for a long time. Zachary. Yeah. And he was also talking about the dangers of witchcraft and how he first got involved in witchcraft, where, as a child, I think he was something like 10 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
And he and a bunch of kids would go into the bathroom and turn out the light and somehow look into a mirror or something like that, and you would see something in the mirror, and all the other kids ran out because they were scared, but he thought, wow, this is cool. And so the devil was able to, the demons were able to come into him through that dabbling in that kind of occult type of thing. So young kids, they don't understand what they're getting into.
Yeah. I mean, the King's really sharp on this. He talks about how, the Satanists think it's a big joke. They act like it's a big joke.
Well, they know it's not a joke, but they try to make it like it is a big joke. Yeah.
I mean, to them, it's like they know what it is, but they're playing us. They're playing people who are ignorant.
They're fooling people.
Yeah, but for kids coming up,
it's nothing. It's nothing. Yeah. So this lady is now studying at the Arizona State University, so has less time to travel the world with her exorcist crew, Savannah, who is now married, and Tess. But Bryn revealed that she has visited the UK in the past, this is a UK paper, and claimed witchcraft is a big problem. She said witchcraft has a big stronghold on the UK right now, so a lot of people are trying to cast spells, and we dealt with a woman who went to a witch doctor. That was kind of extreme, but it happens more often than you think, and it opens the doors to demons. Many skeptics have slammed her work as being a money-making scam, but Bryn claims she has never received a penny for her exorcisms, despite her dad saying on the Anderson Cooper talk show he can get up to $500 for an exorcism. Single Bryn accepts that not everyone will understand what she does, and she has had boyfriends in the past break up with her over her exorcism work. Okay. Yeah, it takes an alpha male, alpha man to be able to handle a woman like this. I would say she's an alpha woman, but she is resolute to the cause and has no plans to stop. She said, "I have the skills to help someone if they need it, so I want to donate my time to help, and I can't just turn my back on that. It's touching that I'm allowed to get the opportunity to see something extraordinary. It's not me doing it; it's God working through me. I just have to show up and do the best I can."
Well, Jay, Tim, I lived in the UK 14 years, so I can corroborate her story there. I mean,
about the witchcraft in the UK.
Yeah, in the UK it's subtle. I mean, I was involved in yoga. The King sort of warned me off that, actually. But it's kind of thought that those things are kind of fine. You get involved in local groups, whether it be a meditation group or, massage, Reiki, or these things, which is all, seem fairly innocuous. But then as you get more involved, you begin to notice that there's a pull. There's a pull in a certain direction.
Yes.
And because in the UK, which distinct from the U.S., you have the monarchy. You have a feminine monarchy, and she is the head of the church. Actually, the Queen of England is the head of the Anglican Church. But obviously, as the king has pointed out, this is not a God-side monarchy. And particularly, I think, now that the three kingships have been established, particularly we have the cosmic perfection level blessing, then that makes all the kingships of the world satanic. So Britain is in this unfortunate position. They have this kind of, apparently able-side monarchy, which is now being exposed to being quite demonic.
Yes.
And so this cascades down through the society, through these kind of benign, innocuous groups, and being, it's like I saw recently an ad with Tesco. I think maybe you showed that in the King's Report. Tesco, which is a big supermarket chain in the UK. So they had like a multicultural ad for Christmas showing, but it didn't show anything overtly Christian, but there was a Muslim and a Sikh, and they all, made it that they were coming to dinner together, and they're all enjoying. So Britain is like the beta testing of the satanic world. It's the most surveilled society in the world. Everything coming to the U.S. now is beta tested in the UK, including jihadism and truck terrorist attacks.
Yes.
So, but the
So
spiritual,
can acid attacks be far behind?
acid attacks, yeah. So the spiritual situation, though, as the king has pointed out, because of the dominion of the satanic monarchy, the satanic matriarchy, that's holding the throat of Britain. And I have a friend in Britain who's a strong Christian, a guy I worked with, and there are strong Christians in Britain. There are guys like Tommy Robinson who are fighting a pitched battle against jihadis. I mean, there are righteous Christians in the UK. But I mean, compared to what we have here, I mean, we really have to appreciate what we have here in the United States and here in Pennsylvania. We got to be willing to fight for what we have now, Tim.
Yeah.
Seriously,
We do.
And kind of with the attitude, absolutely, we cannot be defeated.
Yes.
It can't be the kind of thing where we might, we're going to give it our best shot. No. It's like we win or we're dead.
Okay. When we come back, we'll talk about the nuclear cloud that is hanging over Europe.
Really?
Don't go away. Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in for the second King of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon, and I'm here with Mr. Ted O'Grady, Son of God. And a nuclear fallout alert has been given for Europe as a Russian radioactive leak sweeps across Europe. A nuclear disaster in Russia has sent a radioactive cloud across Europe, experts have warned. The pollution recorded indicates that an accident happened in a nuclear facility in Russia or just over the border in Kazakhstan in the last week of September. I guess they're not telling us about it.
No.
This comes just a week after the UK was struck by radiation fog. Radiation fog.
Really? I didn't hear about that.
With the Met Office issuing an alert. Nuclear radiation fears are also being caused by North Korea with their testing of the hydrogen bomb and missiles. So China is actually concerned, and China is using this now as an excuse to finally get involved with this situation. French Nuclear Safety Institute, IRSN, made the terrifying warning yesterday. It added the accident was likely in a nuclear field treatment site or center for radioactive medicine. Luckily, there has been no impact on human health.
This is in the UK.
This is in Europe in general, I guess.
Yeah.
No impact on human health. They always tell you, oh, don't worry. Right?
Why are they telling him?
Or the environment in Europe, the IRSN said. Russian authorities have said they are not aware of an accident on their territory, IRSN Director Jean-Marc Perez has said.
Sounds like a false flag to me, Tim.
Perez said that in recent weeks, IRSN and several other nuclear safety institutes in Europe had measured high levels of radioactive ruthenium-106. It is usually used in nuclear medicine. He continued that the quantity released was major and would have triggered a major evacuation if it happened in France. Measurements showed high levels of ruthenium-106 in the atmosphere of the majority of European countries at the beginning of October. Now they tell us this is a month ago. The IRSN said it would have had no consequence for human health and the environment. Yeah. The probability of it getting into imported food is also extremely low. This comes just last month. Just last month, it was revealed in North Korea. Then it goes when they don't have anything else to write about, they write about something else. So, all right. So, if anyone is going to Europe today, or if you're in Europe today, don't breathe the air.
So should I be worried about my 3 young adult children living in London? Should I be more worried about the radiation or the jihadis?
The jihadis, I think.
Really?
Yes.
You know, I was over there in September at the time there was a terrorist attack. It was in the Tube, the underground station, Parsons Heath in North London. So every time there's an attack in London, right? Now, the first thing I do is go on my WhatsApp and make sure my 3 kids are okay. You know, so I'm over there when this actually happened, and you know, of course, the Brits are, you know, they're after being through the Blitz in World War II and being bombed, you know, like 4 years straight every single day, and then of course the IRA, which you know, went through their terrorist thing in the early 70s. They're very resilient. Okay, so when this attack happened, I'm there, and they just reported, oh, there was an incident on the Tube this morning in North London. There were 8 injuries. They're in the hospital taking care of it now. They carry on. They just carry on as normal. And that evening, I went. I had to meet Jacob Mingala.
But do they have a 24-hour cable news in the UK?
They have the BBC.
Well, they have BBC. What?
Yeah.
So, but they don't really they don't have a lot of competition, I guess. So, like here in America, if 8 people were injured in the New York subway, then all the news stations would be there, and you know, they would, even if there was no story, they'd have to create a story out of competition.
Yeah. It's not quite like that. You do have, you know, like 4 news channels. You have Channel 4 and Sky News. You do have Sky News, which I think is kind of like Fox. But anyway, the point is that when I went to East London, I drove in that night, okay, because I was a bit outside of London to meet Jacob Mingala, who's our sanctuary brother in East London. And so I'm driving through East London, which is, you know, it's like 50% plus Muslim population. You know, and the thing is, these Muslim males, these males, they're just so freaking aggressive. They're just totally wound up all the time. they're driving here and there. I'm driving by. There's two guys on the street corner fighting or just sparring for the heck of it. And but the Brits are like, we're not going to worry. We'll do a nice advert with Tesco showing the virtues of multiculturalism. We're not worried. In the meantime, Tommy Robinson is there, getting put in jail 6 times for just trying to protect his daughter from being raped. And that's what it's like. I mean, it's just awesome. But I was actually impressed on one hand at the resiliency of British people. And also, like, hey, these guys just capitulated, basically. Okay, there was an incident in the subway in North London. Text my 3 kids, are you okay? Yeah, we're okay, Dad. Great, okay, well, I'll talk to you the next time there's a terrorist attack. Make sure you're okay. Carry on.
I want to come back to the U.S. now, where the special counsel Mueller is investigating alleged plan to take this Muslim cleric, Islamic cleric, who lives about an hour and a half from here, or about an hour or so from here.
I've heard about that.
His name is Gulen, and to hand him over to Turkey. And there was apparently the investigator now is looking into the possibility that Michael Flynn, the former advisor, national security advisor to President Trump, was involved in this plan to somehow kidnap this guy and turn him over to Turkey. This is something going on that people need to be aware of. Special Counsel Robert Mueller is looking into an alleged plan involving former White House National Security Advisor Mike Flynn and a possible deal with Turkey, Fox News confirms, after a report that a proposal was floated to pay him and his son millions to deliver a controversial cleric to the Turkish government. The Wall Street Journal reported that the alleged plan being investigated would have paid Flynn and his son Michael Flynn Jr. up to $15 million for delivering Fethullah Gulen to the Turkish government. The journal cited people with knowledge of the FBI's inquiries, saying the Bureau is asking individuals about a December meeting in New York City with Flynn and Turkish government representatives where Gulen's removal was discussed. Lawyers for Flynn said in a statement that the allegations were outrageous and prejudicial before concluding they are false. Out of respect for the process of the various investigations regarding the 2016 campaign, we have intentionally avoided responding to every rumor or allegation raised in the media, Robert Kellner, Stephen Anthony, and Brian Smith wrote. But today's news cycle has brought allegations about General Flynn, ranging from kidnapping to bribery, that are so outrageous and prejudicial that we are making an exception to our usual rule. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has long sought for the U.S. to extradite Gulen, who resides in the United States, in actually Saylorsville, Pennsylvania.
Really?
It's just the other side of I-80.
So what is he? Is he a terrorist camp up there? Who is he? He's a radical imam?
Yeah, he's an imam, yes, and he's pretty radical. It was mentioned just briefly in yesterday's King's Report. I can, after we get through this, I'll tell a little bit about who he is. The journal reported that the alleged discussion involved possibly moving Gulen to a Turkish prison island. The investigation is part of Mueller's expansive probe of Russian meddling. So, wait a second, Russian meddling, and now it's kidnapping in Pennsylvania. So wait a second.
Nothing to do with Russian meddling.
And the 2016 election.
Was this before then Erdogan came in Turkey? Because Turkey's been radicalized.
So this discussion was December of last year, so that would have been after Erdogan came in. And I think before and after there was an attempted coup that failed about a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So Erdogan came in sometime before that, and Erdogan is accusing this guy of masterminding that coup attempt about a year ago.
Oh, I see.
Approximately a year ago. Yeah.
So they're both radicals, but they're fighting each other. If there's the cleric here and Erdogan, so there's an internal sort of Shia-Sunni thing.
The investigation is part of Mueller's expansive probe, meddling in the 2016 election and possible collusion with the Trump associates. The probe has resulted so far in the indictment of Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, relating to his work for the government of Ukraine, which also was before he met Trump and has nothing to do. So Mueller is trying very, 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 very hard to somehow connect Russia and Trump. So he's casting his net very, very widely.
Of course, we have found out about Hillary's connection.
We
with
have
Russia.
found out about that, yes.
I haven't seen
of course, Mueller has got blinders on that.
I mean, he's perfectly positioned to investigate that.
Yes.
But isn't it true the special prosecutor can do whatever he wants?
Pretty much, yes.
He's like the Grand Inquisitor.
Yes, he can basically do anything he wants.
That's what he's pretty much doing anything he
Yes.
wants, isn't he? But Trump can fire him, can he not?
Theoretically, well, I think theoretically, the Justice Department, whoever is the head of the Justice Department, right now Jeff Sessions has recused himself, so it would have to be his deputy who would fire him, I believe. But I don't know if the president has the power to fire him.
Is there any chance that Jeff Sessions could just recuse himself from the attorney generalship?
Well, he might as well resign then. It would be better if he resigned.
Maybe Trump could put in someone like Rudy Giuliani, for example.
Giuliani, I don't know if Giuliani's interested.
I don't know what went down there, but if Rudy had been in there, man, he would have gone after Hillary right away.
Yeah, we wouldn't be having this election in Alabama. A lot of things would be different. So anyways, it's not clear whether the Gulen plan resulted in any money actually changing hands. White House spokesman told the Journal, "We don't have any evidence that such a meeting took place, and if it did take place, it happened notwithstanding the transition." So anyway, Mueller is trying to, but it's this imam down in Saylorsville is an interesting character. He has made clear that he does not like Christianity, and he does not like America for that.
So why is he here then?
For that matter.
Is he being protected?
He's sort of exiled because if he were to go back to Turkey, he would be imprisoned. Yeah.
But isn't this all? I heard that Mike Flynn though is sort of the sacrificial lamb in a sense because he's the guy that's sort of put himself forward to try to dismantle the deep state, Arab Spring, Muslim Brotherhood, the whole thing that we see exploding now with the Yemenis' attack on Saudi Arabia and this sort of obscure things that are now coming to light.
I'm looking up the Gulen movement, an Islamic transnational religious and social movement by the Turkish preacher Fethullah Gulen, who has lived in the United States since 1999. The movement has no official name, but is usually referred to as the Service or the Service Movement by his followers and as a society, community, or assembly. Anyways, he and the Turkish government do not get along.
Of course, David Cameron, before he lost his prime ministership in the UK, gave a very inspiring speech about his dream of having a highway from Ankara to London. Ankara being the capital of Turkey. So, you know, if he had had his way, we'd have a superhighway right now from Ankara to London.
Politicians, you know, Father, of course, talk about the international highway, and politicians have also sort of like these large transnational infrastructure projects. The international highway, or actually international railroad, was actually, or the Bering Strait connection was actually caught the interest of the Tsar Nicholas in Russia just prior to the Russian Revolution. And actually a company was established in New Jersey at that time to build a bridge across the Bering Strait between Alaska and Siberia. And they felt that they could do it with the technology at that time. I don't know if they would have succeeded or not, but they might have. But and also Lenin and Stalin and other communist leaders were interested also in building a railroad connection to Alaska and to the North American continent. Of course, it would have made it easier for them to spread communism to North America if they had been able to do that. But I think the important thing about these things is that, Father proposed this, but this was proposed this, and some people say, well, as long as we get a highway, or I think it's more than just about building a road, or in the case of the Bering Strait, it's more than just digging a hole and being able to sort of walk or run or ride a bike from Alaska to Siberia. Really, it has to be done in terms of Father's teaching and Father's ideal, and I think Father's name has to be associated with that for that kind of thing to succeed, because transnational things can just as easily act as routes for invasion, right?
Yes.
And this was the thing during the 19th century with railroads. Countries were building railroads as means for invasion. And in fact, in some of the wars in the 19th century, railroads were used. In World War I, railroads were used pretty effectively by different sides, especially the German side. So these transnational highways, railroads, I hope that the day can come when we can, and I know it will come, when we can build these things in Father's name and according to Father's ideal as conduits for peace.
Yes, they ought to be. And Father, as the Lord of the Second Advent, came to save the world. So Father's whole mentality until the day he died was to save the whole world. So when I look at Father, the decisions he made, particularly later on in his ministry, working with people like George H.W. Bush, who is the chief demon. Father actually wanted to convert the chief demons.
Yes.
He would get Soros in the room. He would get those guys in one room and convert them. And I saw this. I'm sure you saw this yourself many times, Tim, but I remember one time in particular in 1996, right after I graduated from UTS, we were down in Washington, and Father was speaking to a group of dignitaries. They were all like ex-prime ministers or whatever. They were high-level people, right? And Father started talking about sexual organs and absolute sex, concave and convex.
Yes.
And sadly, some of our members and leaders are kind of, shamefaced or embarrassed that Father's talking about this, also.
Yeah, Reverend Kwok was very embarrassed, and Mother was the Han Mother was very embarrassed, and a lot of other leaders are very embarrassed, and they wanted Father to stop talking concave and convex, and so he became more, more descriptive.
But Father, that's how Father converted people.
Yes.
So Father found the people who came to his side.
Yes.
So what we saw is that Father's foundation, and we see those people now coming to the second king.
Yes. One of the last emails I had with someone who chose to go with the Han Mother was that he could no longer defend Father.
Who said that?
Someone who I used to know.
Okay.
And but I realized then that this person had been trying to defend Father all along, when Father does not need anyone to defend him. He needs people to testify to him.
That's a very deep point, Tim.
That's a very important difference, I think, that escapes many people, that Father needs people, and the second king needs people who will testify to him, not people who will defend him.
That's right, exactly. I'm not here to help the second king. I'm here to attend the second king and attend God's providence through the second king.
Yes.
It's an attitude of humility and unmerited grace, Tim.
Yes, absolutely. Meanwhile, in the world of Satan, a North Carolina air traffic controller with access to a control tower was arrested Friday for possessing, transporting, and acquiring a weapon of mass destruction, police said. Paul George Dan, 30, was booked along with his roommate, Derek Fells, in Charlotte, North local reports said. The arrests arose out of an investigation into a November 3rd call to police concerning an individual with an explosive, according to WCNC in Charlotte. Police said that Fells admitted building a pipe bomb to use against a neighbor, but later decided to give the explosive device to Dan instead, WCNC and other local outlets reported. The Federal Aviation Administration immediately fired Dan after his arrest and revoked his access to Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Authorities at the airport stressed that Dan only had access to off-site air traffic control tower. Dan is being held at a county jail on $45,000 bond. The FBI is assisting local police with the investigation. Federal charges aren't expected at the moment. Interesting. They don't tell us what that weapon of mass destruction is, but if federal charges are not expected, one wonders.
As long as the FBI is on top of it, Tim, I don't think we have anything to worry about. You know?
What could possibly go wrong? Yes. Cue Las Vegas.
Yeah. No. Hey.
Las Vegas has turned into a complete comedy. Unfortunately, it's not. We shouldn't be laughing about it because it's terrible, but it is. It's a complete comedy. We have, after all this time in Las Vegas, we have no idea. We know something happened, and we know a lot of people died. That much we will accept, and we grieve for those who died. But in terms of investigation, in terms of releasing information to the public, it's a textbook issue of a comedy, and I have no idea what happened there. Somebody fired some guns. I know that.
Maybe the classified
or some buddies fired some guns. Let's go to Lebanon. Lebanon president calls on Riyadh to clarify reasons stopping Harari return. Lebanon's president called on Saudi Arabia on Saturday to clarify the reasons preventing Prime Minister Saad al-Harari returning to Beirut, his office said.
Oh, really? He's being kidnapped in Saudi Arabia.
President Michael Aoun said Lebanon does not accept its prime minister being in a situation at odds with international treaties and the standard rules and relations between states. Lebanese authorities believe Harari is being held by Saudi Arabia from where he quit in a broadcast last week. Two top Lebanese government officials, a senior politician close to Harari, and a fourth source have said. So, wow, your prime minister goes to visit a country, all right, and while he's there, he quits as prime minister.
Okay.
And he doesn't come back.
What happened there, Tim?
So it's like Theresa May goes to France, and while she's in France, she announces she resigns, and then the French government won't let her go back.
Well, that actually wouldn't be a bad idea.
This is crazy. This is crazy. But
what's going on there? I heard that there's
what's going on
from Yemeni and the deep state involved. And
so this is in the context of the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Okay. They are at loggerheads with each other, and they both want to kill each other. And Iran is kind of taking over Lebanon now. Lebanon used to be basically under the tutelage of Syria.
Right.
And now, with things changing there, Iran is basically now gaining control of Lebanon, as I understand. But the prime minister was pro-Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And so basically he kind of ran, I think he says here that he went to Saudi Arabia, but I think he kind of ran away to Saudi Arabia. And he's not being held there, he's being allowed to stay there, being protected there, yeah.
But then there's a civil war in Saudi Arabia, right?
Well, let's read another Reuters story that's related. Hezbollah's leader said on Friday that Saudi Arabia has declared war on Lebanon and his Iran-backed group, accusing Riyadh of detaining Saad al-Harari and forcing him to resign as Lebanon's prime minister to destabilize the country. But already Saudi Arabia accused Lebanon of declaring war on it.
Yeah.
And now Lebanon or Hezbollah is saying that Saudi Arabia has declared war on Lebanon. So boom, 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 boom. Things could get pretty dicey. Let's take a break for a minute here.
Okay.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Carr Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry, Carr Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Carr Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit carr.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017. I apologize. I suddenly came down with whatever it is that Hillary has, and so we had to take a break there. Let's look a little more closely at this situation between Saudi Arabia and Lebanon. Hezbollah's leader said on Friday that Saudi Arabia had declared war on Lebanon and his Iran-backed group, accusing Riyadh of detaining Saad al-Hariri and forcing him to resign as Lebanon's prime minister to destabilize the country. France became the first Western country to indicate that Saudi Arabia was holding Hariri against his will, the prime minister of another country, holding him against his will.
That's an act of war right there.
Yeah, saying it wished for him to have all his freedom, this is France speaking, all his freedom of movement and be fully able to play the essential role that is his in Lebanon, unquote. That was France. Hariri's resignation has plunged Lebanon into crisis, thrusting the small Arab country back into the forefront of regional rivalry between the Sunni Muslim monarchy, Saudi Arabia, and Shiite revolutionary Iran.
Of course, Lebanon was a French colony, and Beirut was the Paris of the Middle East.
Paris of the Middle East, yes. That was a long time ago, but that's what it was once known as, yes. It was about the time that Pyongyang was known as the Jerusalem of the East.
All right.
These old nicknames or names no longer hold true. Syed Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader, said Saudi Arabia's detention of Hariri, a longtime Saudi ally who declared his resignation while in Riyadh last Saturday, was an insult to all Lebanese and he must return to Lebanon. Quote, let us say things as they are. The man is detained in Saudi Arabia and forbidden until this moment from returning to Lebanon, unquote, Nasrallah said in a televised speech. It is clear that Saudi Arabia and Saudi officials have declared war on Lebanon and on Hezbollah in Lebanon, unquote, he said. His comments mirror an accusation by Riyadh on Monday that Lebanon and Hezbollah had declared war on the conservative Gulf Arab Kingdom, as on Saudi Arabia. Okay. So the timeline is that on Saturday, the Lebanon prime minister who is in Saudi Arabia, who's visiting Saudi Arabia, declares that he is resigning as prime minister. And then 2 days later, on Monday, Saudi Arabia says, oh, Lebanon and Hezbollah have declared war on us. And now, on Friday, Lebanon, or at least Hezbollah, is returning the favor, saying, oh, you declared war on us. Saudi Arabia has declared war on us. So things are getting complicated. Riyadh says, that's Riyadh is
who's in charge in Saudi Arabia?
In Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, who's in charge?
Well, the crown prince.
Didn't they just kill a few people?
Well, they arrested a few people.
Oh, okay.
Lots of people, actually. A bunch of people. And the new crown prince, a 32-year-old, I think he is, Mohammed bin Salman, I think, is in charge pretty much in Saudi Arabia. Riyadh says Hariri is a free man. Riyadh is the Saudi government. And he decided to resign because Hezbollah was calling the shots in his government. That may be true. Saudi Arabia considers Hezbollah to be its enemy in conflicts across the Middle East, including Syria and Yemen. The Western countries have looked on with alarm at the rising regional tension. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson warned other countries and groups against using Lebanon as a vehicle for a larger proxy fight in the Middle East, saying Washington strongly backed Lebanon's independence and respected Hariri as a strong partner of the United States, still referring to him as prime minister. quote, "There is no legitimate place or role in Lebanon for any foreign forces, militias, or armed elements other than the legitimate security forces of the Lebanese state," unquote, Tillerson said in a statement released by the U.S. State Department. Well, Hezbollah is already there.
Decades.
Yes. Tillerson told reporters on Friday that there was no indication that Hariri was being held in Saudi Arabia against his will, but that the United States was monitoring the situation. So apparently the French foreign minister, though, said earlier on Friday that he also believed Hariri was a free man, a statement at odds with the later French foreign ministry comment that it wanted Hariri to have all his freedom of movement. So a little bit of confusion there in France. Hariri has made no public remarks since announcing his resignation in a speech televised from Saudi Arabia, saying he feared assassination and accusing Iran and Hezbollah of sowing strife in the Arab world. Two top Lebanese government officials, a senior politician close to Hariri, and a fourth source told Reuters on Thursday that the Lebanese authorities believe Hariri is being held in Saudi Arabia. Nasrallah said Saudi Arabia was encouraging Israel to attack Lebanon. That's interesting, that Saudi Arabia is encouraging Israel to attack Lebanon.
Right.
While an Israeli attack could not be ruled out entirely, he said it was unlikely, partly because Israel knew it would pay a very high price. I warned them against any miscalculation or any step to exploit the situation, he said. Saudi will fail in Lebanon as it has failed on all fronts, Nasrallah said. Nasrallah is the head of the Hezbollah. Riyadh has advised Saudi citizens not to travel to Lebanon, or if already there, to leave as soon as possible. Other Gulf states have also issued travel warnings. Those steps have raised concern that Riyadh could take measures against the tiny Arab state, which hosts 1.5 million Syrian refugees. Hariri's resignation is being widely seen as part of Saudi's attempt to counter Iran as its influence deepens in Syria and Iraq, and as Riyadh and its allies battle Iranian-allied Houthi rebels in Yemen. Hariri's resignation unraveled a political deal among rival factions that made him prime minister and President Michael Aoun a political ally of Hezbollah, head of state last year. The coalition government included Hezbollah, a heavily armed military and political organization. Aoun told Saudi Arabia's envoy on Friday that Hariri must return to Lebanon, and the circumstances surrounding his resignation as prime minister while in Saudi Arabia were unacceptable, presidential sources said.
You know, this reminds me of Tim when the king's talking about how sexual ethics determine a civilization. Right, and the fact that now everyone knows that Islam is, allows pedophilia, multiple marriage. I mean, again, in the UK, there's, websites for, second, third, fourth wives. You want to have as many children as you can, sons as you can. So in the Middle East, it's so complicated, right? Because there's this guy and this half-brother and this bastard son and this one. And now, so now you try to win with a paradigm of good and bad guys. It doesn't really work in the Middle East somehow. But I'm curious about what's actually going on with the CIA and the deep state and Mike Flynn, who tries to dismantle this thing, because there was this missile that was launched from Yemen.
Yemen, yes.
Which Yemen has no capacity to build such a missile.
Right. It was
so where the
parts identified it as being made in Iran, yes.
It was made in Iran. So whether it was Iranian or it was part of some other shady group.
The Saudis shot it down with a Patriot missile. Good news, Patriot missiles work.
It worked, okay. They shot it down.
And they shot it down. They looked at the sort of the parts that came down from the destroyed missile, and they were apparently made in Yemen, or they were marked as...
Were they American? They were American made then?
in Iran, I'm sorry.
The missile must have been American.
No, made in Iran.
Made in Iran?
Made in Iran. That's what the parts said, yes.
They don't make missiles in Iran, though.
Of course they make missiles in Iran. They make lots of... They import from North Korea. They make their own missiles. Yeah, they make missiles in Iran. Sure, yeah. Yeah, they make lots of missiles in Iran.
So what's going on with the CIA in regards to the...
I'll have to call up my sources in the CIA to answer that.
I know you have them. Agent Tim Elder, we know you have your sources, yeah?
I don't know. We'll have to... but I'm very concerned that before there's war in East Asia, that there may be war, or maybe simultaneously war in Middle East. And the United States has already given up the capacity to fight two wars simultaneously. So what will happen if, and this was what Kuk Chinim was warning back in 2010, 11, 12, that if the United States has to fight wars on two fronts simultaneously, that is the Middle East and East Asia simultaneously, it's more likely to choose the Middle East.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality of domestic American politics.
But then again, Trump's there. He's been there.
And maybe this is, what China is calculating also. And it could be that, we know that Iran and North Korea are close. And it could be that China is also involved in this situation, fomenting trouble there, so that they can take advantage of a shift of U.S. forces to the Middle East. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back in a moment with our final segment with news from a Choniga perspective.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group, with a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group, made in the USA. Visit car.com today. Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group, with a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood, the history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun, to the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group, made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
And welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, November 11th, 2017. Today, of course, is Veterans Day, and so let's talk a little bit about Veterans Day. This was originally, of course, the day that the First World War ended at, I think, 11 a.m. On November 11th in Paris, or in France, on a railroad track. As Veterans Day arrives, it is important for those who have never served to take a moment to understand the solitary world of a vet. This is a column that originally appeared on the website U.S. Defense Watch, and I'm reading it from foxnews.com. Millions of vets are and have been successful in all endeavors. They are doctors, lawyers, business people, and 1,000 other professions. Not all have PTSD. Not all are the troubled, brooding, street corner homeless guy, although they exist and need help desperately. No matter how successful a vet might be materially, more often than not, vets are often alone, mentally and spiritually, each day for the rest of their lives. Vet stories are all different, but some elements of the common experience exist. Many vets experienced and saw and heard and did things unimaginable to the average person. They also lived a daily camaraderie that cannot be repeated in the civilian world. In fact, many vets spend the rest of their lives seeking the same esprit de corps that simply is absent from their civilian lives and jobs. They long to spend just 15 minutes back with the best friends they ever had, friends that are scattered to every corner of the earth, and some to the afterlife itself. Are you a veteran, by the way?
No, I'm not.
I'm not either. Vets are haunted by visions of horror and death, by guilt of somehow surviving and living the good life when some they knew are gone. They strangely wish sometimes that they were back in those dreadful circumstances, not to experience the dirt and horror and terror and noise and violence again, but to be with the only people a vet really knows, other vets. Civilians must understand that for a vet, nothing is ever the same again. Their senses can be suddenly illuminated by the slightest sound or smell or sight, sights of death all around, a living version of Dante's Inferno. Sounds so loud that they can only be described as Saving Private Ryan and surround sound on steroids. Smells vast and horrific, rotting death, burning fuel and equipment, rubber animals and people, these smoldering ruins of life all around them. All vets have these thoughts nearly every day. Some may experience them for fractions of a second or for minutes at a time. They replay over and over again like an endless 24-hour movie. Part of the solitary world of the vet is being able to enjoy complete bliss doing absolutely nothing. This is the trait grating to civilians who must constantly search for endless stimuli. Unbeknownst to them, the greatest thrill of all is just being alive. A lot of vets have an Obi-Wan Kenobi calmness after what they went through. How bad can anything really be? As King said to Chris in Platoon, make it out of here. It's all gravy every day of the rest of your life. Gravy. So many, if not all vets, walk around each day lost in their own special story. They were only great actors. They were once great actors on a giant stage with speaking parts and props. Maybe they were heroes and now they aren't anymore. Maybe they helped save the world and now they can't. Maybe they gave orders and now they take them. Maybe they thought they could accomplish anything, and now they know they can't. Perhaps their lives now are smaller and slower, and sometimes, in the vet's mind, just incidental, even though they're not. Most civilians are oblivious to the solitary life of the vet, but it's there. It's the same eternal and universal philosophy, whether you fought in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, or Afghanistan. The experiences may have been different, but the emotions are the same. The problem with the solitary world of the vet is that the vet has a hard time explaining what he or she did to those who didn't serve. Some vets want to talk, but they have no outlet. Maybe their only outlet is watching a war movie or reading a book about the conflict they were in. How often do people say, Grandpa never talks about Korea? That's because Grandpa knows no one can understand except for other vets. That's because Grandpa knows most people don't care. Part of this taciturn mentality is that vets speak another language, a strange and archaic language of their past. How do you talk to civilians about fire for effect, or grid 7310, or shake and bake, or frag orders, or 10 days and a wake up, or 1,001 other terms that are mystifying to the real world? You can't. All this adds to the solitary world of the vet. Some are better at handling life afterwards than others. Some don't seem affected at all, but they are. They just hide it. Some never return to normal, but what is normal to a vet anymore? So this Veterans Day, if you see a vet sitting by themselves at a restaurant or on a train or shopping at the grocery store alone, take a moment to speak with them. Take them out of their solitary world for a moment. You'll be happy you did.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a nice piece.
This is actually Veterans Day, Remembrance Sunday. This is the one sacred day in the United Kingdom. Have you ever watched the ceremony, the cenotaph?
No, I have not. No.
So what happens there, when I went to the UK...
In the UK, they wear the little poppy...
yeah, in Flanders Field. Where
Flanders Field, yeah.
So what it is, the UK has one sacred day, that is Remembrance Sunday. That is probably tomorrow. And what you find there is the deep sacrifice. You find the providential will of God on that day. If you go to any small village in the United Kingdom, there will be an obelisk. And if you look at the names of the war dead from World War I and World War II, World War I will have, you go to a small village and you'll see 24 names. Many of the same surnames. So I've often thought, what is it about the United Kingdom? What is the trauma here? Literally at the apex of their civilization, thinking they're blessed and ordained of God, they're called to World War I, and their sons are emptied from these villages and thrown into a trench in northern France and Belgium and slaughtered. And so that is really where I personally felt God's love, God's hope, the deep connection between the United Kingdom and the United States and Christianity, the sacrifice, as we know from principle, the Messiah was born on the basis of the sacrifice of the First World War.
Yes.
So if anyone gets an opportunity to watch Remembrance Sunday on the BBC, I would highly recommend that.
Okay. Yeah. This, of course, is the 99th anniversary of the end of World War I, and next year will be the centenary of that terrible war. And a lot of videos and other things are being produced right now about that war, in particular, and the just a terrible, terrible, terrible human slaughter that went on during that time. One of the differences between the Vietnam War and the Afghanistan War, of course, the Afghanistan War is now the longest war in American history, 16 years in counting. And Vietnam War, remember, every night in the newscast they would say, okay, this is how many Americans died today. You know, and sometimes the number would be in the tens or in the hundreds. And every night, and also they would give, I think, a body count for the enemy as well, for the North Vietnamese army or the Viet Cong. We don't have that today. No. And I think one reason is that not as many Americans are being killed, which is a good thing. But it also the side effect of that, or the effect of that, is that. Americans are not nearly as aware of the Afghanistan War as we were of the Vietnam War. So, for example, in Vietnam War, people were asking, "Why are we there? Why are we there?" And actually, in Vietnam, we were there for a good reason. We were there to defeat communism, although to contain communism, although that purpose was not really appreciated by especially by the civilian leaders who caused America's defeat in the Vietnam War, despite the fact that our military won every battle. But in Afghanistan, people are not asking, why are we there? Why are we there? To guard the poppy fields?
Yeah.
But people are not asking this, and people need to ask it. It's just amazing to me that this war apparently has no end. I think President Trump has given. I believe that he's not, of course, not putting this out publicly, and he shouldn't. But I trust and believe that President Trump has given the military some kind of a deadline. So listen, you guys, either accomplish something by this date, or we're gonna get out. Must not tell that to the enemy, because they will simply wait until after you get out, and then they will do what they want. But I certainly hope that President Trump has given the military some kind of a deadline for a pullout from Afghanistan. I hope that one thing we can do on Veterans Day is to pray that we will have fewer veterans in the future. We shouldn't be sending our sons and daughters to fight in wars, because as this piece that I just read said, when you go to a war, when a person goes to a war, although I have not been to a war, but when a person goes to a war, they see and do and experience things that are unimaginable in the normal context, and they see and are required to do things that no person should have to see, or no person should have to do. But they do these because they are called to do so by their country, and so they really sacrifice themselves, even if they come back without a single scratch on their bodies. They're as this piece show that they are, that I just read, show that they are changed forever, and not necessarily in a good way. So we, as long as there's Satan in the world, we do have to fight. And in the process of establishing Chonyuguk, we may have to fight. We may have to. We may have some veterans of our own wars in the future. But I hope that on this day, that also we can pray that the day will come when we do not have to send our sons and daughters into wars.
Amen.
And if we do, let's make sure we know what we're doing and get out of there as quickly as possible. Send as few of our sons and daughters as possible, and not just keep it going on and on and on for 16 years and counting, which is what Afghanistan is right now. President Trump really needs to bring some of these wars to an end. Some of which were created, many of which were created by Nobel Peace Prize laureate
right.
Barack Hussein Obama.
Right. Well, Tim, we stand with Christ, and any blood we shed is going to advance the kingdom. Yes. And that's our internal attitude, which we have every day.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ted, for coming.
Thank you, Tim.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. And we thank everyone who has tuned in. We pray that God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.
Time after time, you're my refuge. You heal every scar. You